Right, thanks for that. All right, look, hey, welcome here to this workshop and briefing day today on here the 4th of June. We have some presentations which we're really looking forward to, and the initial morning is really around the proposals around amalgamation in the Waikato and some options around that, but really some information and some reality checks that will help us inform some of the further firmed up decisions down the track. So the first session here will go from 9 to 10 o'clock, and that'll be with Chris McClay, okay, and with Warren Mayer, who's so Chris is the CE of the Waikato Regional Council, and Warren is the the chair of the Waikato Regional Council. So we'd like to welcome you two here, and we'll just start our day with our karakia. So takinga te marama kia tātou. Takinga te aroha kia tātou, takinga te rangimarie kia tātou, ko Prolongia me te kawa, ko maunga tautari, ko kakapuku ngā maunga, ko Waikato, ko waipa ngā awa, tihei Māori ora. All right, kia ora folks. All right, so look, firstly, thank you for your time. For coming in this morning, because you actually didn't have to do this. So we greatly appreciate every bit of information. We sort of alluded yesterday that we're sort of building the plane as we fly it. And so you're part of the building blocks of information that'll help and inform our decision and our knowledge pathway. So without further ado, I'm actually just going to hand over to you so we actually make the best use of your time. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Warren.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mike. And as you alluded, Chris McClay, the CE for Waikato Regional Council beside us. So look, thanks for the invite. I hope we're not just cargo in the plane, and we're happy to be up in the cockpit guiding you in some of the decisions you have in front of you. So yeah, so we just wanted to come along. Obviously, regional council functions are a huge thing for people to get their heads around in that space. So Chris has got a presentation around that, just to outline the facts and figures and something to give you a bit of an understanding. What we've also got for you today is a little bit of an introduction of a potential one single unitary authority, what that might look like, and what we've done in the background is actually break it down around representation. So you can get a few facts and figures, numbers, because the things we sort of hear is how we're going to represent local voice. How's that going to come through to the forefront to make sure that we're getting good coverage across a region the size of the Waikato, with all the differing populations and areas of interest and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'll hand over to Chris to lead your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Kia ora tātou. Ko Chris McClay aho. Is the presentation going to come up? Excellent. So two things you need to know about me. One is I've been at the Waikato Regional Council for nearly 25 years, most of that time in the executive. I've worked very closely with your council, with your staff and councillors over quite a long period of time. That's the first thing. Second thing, Your Worship, to know is that I'm a Waipa ratepayer, and a very proud one, and have been for 30 years. So I live in the probably very northern part of your district, in McGregor Road between Ohopo and Nahanapuri. What I was asked to do is just give a bit of an overview of council functions. This isn't a pitch for any particular outcome, but obviously when you're considering what your council's position might be with Head Start proposals, you have a requirement under the criteria to consider regional functions. Specifically, they call out catchment functions and transport functions and how you'll give effect to treaty settlements and equivalents kind of things. But actually, there's regional functions in their wider context than just what a catchment function or transport function might sound like that you'll need to give effect to. So this is just to, at a high level, try and let you understand what it is we're talking about. And I've got a little bit of very high level sort of financial rating information and how that sort of translates into the Waipa district and other districts. Again, just to give you a flavour. It has been presented to the Merrill Forum. I think a lot of the regional functions, people think they understand them, but they don't really know much about what sits underneath them. And so this might lead to the more questions that you need to ask, but at that starting point. So I hope that's what you're expecting, Worship. Excellent.
Just before we go, the word worship, we don't use that in this. So
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Mike is fine.
Right, that's all good. This works, does it? Yes, it does. So this, as a starter, so the Waikato region, where is it? So about 2.5 million hectares. It's 20% of the North Island, or about 10% of New Zealand's landmass. So it's a big area. It's defined by geographical features. The water that runs off Ruapehu in the south and runs into the Tongariro River, that is part of our region, so part of the flanks of Ruapehu. We go across on the west coast to Moko, down where the Taranaki boundary is. We go up to just north of Port Waikato. Glenbrook Steel Mill isn't quite in our region, it's just on the other side of it. We go across the Hinua Ranges, take in all of the Coromandel, which is Warren's home patch, come down. Waihi is in our region, Waihi Beach isn't. That's part of the Bay of Plenty. So it's a bit of a catchment dividing line going through there. We run along the top of the Kaimai Mamaku Range. The water that flows to the west that defines our boundary there. We skirt around Rotorua City. So a reasonable chunk of Rotorua District is in our region, but not the city itself. So Mamaku, the little township, is in our region. Around the other side, Broadlands, Riparoa, those areas, Waikiki, in the Waikato region. And then we run out on the plateau towards Hawke's Bay. The headwaters of Taupo district has 4 regions. The headwaters of the Rangataiki River define the Bay of Plenty region there, and the Mohaka River defines the Hawke's Bay region. And there's obviously they border Horizons, Manawatu Horizons Regional Council on the other side. So that defines our region on the catchment boundaries. The bit that's often forgotten is the coastal marine area. So we have jurisdiction out to 12 nautical miles. And so we have so another 50% of the area of our region is offshore. And you can see in the blue areas there off the west coast and off the east coast. And that's important because they're physically separated, but we need to manage them together as a region. I just pulled this infographic. There's some useful information on it, like we're about 10% of New Zealand's GDP, and obviously Auckland dominates a lot of New Zealand's GDP. But when it comes to parts of the GDP, like export and manufacturing and processing, as well, you will well know in your district, we punch well above our weight in that area. Energy is critically important in our region for New Zealand. 37% of New Zealand's energy is generated in the Waikato region, a lot of it through the hydropower generation. The base load of geothermal is critical for New Zealand to kind of keep the lights on, or the data warehouses running, and Genesis, as that other backstop, is very important as well. Aggregate and mining, we are the biggest producer of aggregate and mined materials in the country. Not often known, the number of quarries in the Waikato region, which is kind of keeps building Auckland, let alone other parts of the country. There's a lot of gold in them there hills in the Coromandel. There's a lot of sand mining done off the west coast. So we're very important, and the government knows it. Our proximity to Auckland, with a lot of the imports coming into New Zealand through Auckland, a lot of the exports going out through Tauranga at the ports, that's often made a big deal, and the government knows that we have the critical logistics and freight routes that we've got to maintain. You're well aware of that in the Waipa. But what's also often overlooked is we've got a port to the south at Taranaki and a port to the south at Hawke's Bay. And so our critical infrastructure through the region, looking towards other ports, is very important. And that's important for New Zealand from a resilience point of view, if anything ever happened to the two major ports. So there's just a few things about the region. The final comment I'll just make about this is from a catchment point of view. In fact, I might go on to the next one. So there's two major catchments in the Waikato region. One is in blue, in which is the Waikato Waipa catchment. The other's in the yellow there, which is the Waiho-Piako catchment. However, there's to the west, that grey area is the west coast catchments where the rivers effectively run out to the sea. And in the Coromandel, there's a lot of small catchments that run either east or west. So when we talk about catchment functions, we kind of do it in the context of those catchments. The Waikato Waipa catchment is very important, and it's quite complex in how it works. And the best way for me to describe it is that 20% of the water that comes into that catchment is actually derived from the Whanganui River. So 20% of the water that goes into Lake Taupo is externally derived. 10% of the water that flows out of Port Waikato, after all the other water catchment sources come in, is derived from the Whanganui catchment. So that makes it a little bit more complex just in terms of how water flows. The way we manage water through the Waikato Waipa system is for water quality and water allocation is very important. If you start to split that catchment up, obviously you end up in a position you don't want everybody taking water, the allocable water out the top end of it. There's no water left down the bottom end. So water quality, you need enough water passing through the system to dilute water quality impacts further down the system. So managing water is a consideration when people are thinking about Head Start proposals. Then we've got energy generation. We've got the Tongariro power diversion, which creates energy at the top end, and you've got the 9 hydro dams along the river system itself, some of which are in your district. So that needs to be considered in terms of the amount of water that's going through the system. The minimum flow at Karapiro Dam, which is in your district, it is set to ensure there's enough water for cooling at Huntly so that the lights can be kept on at times of low flow. So just a little complication. So we've got to manage energy and water together. On top of that, if there's floods, we need to think about the water that's falling up the top of the catchment, both in the Waipa and the Waikato arms of it, to try and manage floods at the lower end of the catchment. And I'll just talk a little bit more shortly about the flood protection schemes. And then we've got the treaty settlements, of which all of them, the 5 major river settlements, are comprehensive across the entire Waikato Waipa catchment. Put those together, water, energy, flood management, and the treaty settlements, it's a challenging and complicated system to manage. And that's probably the key thing that needs to be considered in any Head Start proposals going forward. In the Waiho-Piako, there's similar complications, but not to the same extent. You've certainly got the water allocation issues, you've got water quality issues, and you've got flood management issues in that catchment. I hope I've tried to simplify it so it's understandable. So in terms of the functions that we deliver, so some are related to our environmental functions under the RMA and the Local Government Act, particularly with respect to air, land, water and coastal. We protect and restore biodiversity. We work with about 125 community groups to enhance biodiversity. One important group we support, obviously as you do as well, as Maungatautari. That's a consideration that's on right at the moment. And we have quite a expenditure supporting those groups right throughout the region. Biosecurity, so we've got a pest management plan required under statute, which identifies 65 pests There could be many, many more. The way the system works is that we identify the ones that we're going to control, but of course we get new incursions all the time. Golden Clam, classic example that you'll be well aware of. But there's the biggest issues usually coming into New Zealand are plant pests, and our teams spend a lot of time trying to manage the priority pest plants. There's a lot of pest plants we can't get to, and we rely on voluntary groups to deal with it. Animal pests, similar, and disease. You know, if you get things like PSA in the country, where, you know, avian bird flu, whatever, the way the system works, there's a national response, there's a regional response, and there's local responses, and we all have to work together. So that needs to be considered. Environmental monitoring and science, I'm going to give a bit more information on that as an example of what sits under the hood in a minute, but we've got important functions there. Spatial information, we collect a lot of data and information and we try and make sense of it. All that LiDAR and aerial photo information, we try to make it useful so people can use it in their daily lives, or, you know, the likes of your councils can use it in your planning functions and so on. We're involved in strategic planning, both at a sub-regional level, obviously with the likes of Future-Proof, at a regional level with spatial plans and inter-regional strategies where we work with other councils in the Upper North Island and try and work across regions for the greater good. I think we've just signed off on 5 regional strategies, an energy strategy, a water security strategy, thinking about what happens when the climate gets drier, how we make sure there's water provided for the future. Biodiversity strategy, we're working on a waste strategy at the moment. It gives a flavour. We try and deal with things at a scale which is meaningful for the region. We're required, just like you've got a district plan, we have a regional plan and separately a coastal plan. Under the new replacement resource management legislation, we will need to be integrating those into a natural environment plan. We give effect to those plans through our regulatory part of the organisation. We hold about 12,500 consents under the RMA. We also do large dam consenting under the Building Act on behalf of all regional councils in the North Island. There's just not enough of them for every council to be with being accredited as a building authority. Our plan is probably the most permissive regionally in New Zealand, and so we have a lot of permitted activities which all have conditions attached, and compliance, monitoring, enforcement. Government holds us to account to ensure we're doing that adequately. We've got about 50 people involved in that, which needs to be considered and how it goes forward. The government has talked about potentially lifting that function out and taking it at a national level. They've said they're considering it, that's all we know.
I'd like to interrupt you for 2 seconds at that point. So government did commission a review at looking at regional council functions and what it could take up to central government, what could be sort of nationalised. And this was the only one, as I understood it, that is getting further consideration through the RMA review, you know, the new resource management review reform process. Is that correct, as you understand it? So yeah, this might be the only one. We don't know when that would happen or what it would look like. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was the DIA, Rapid Review of Regional Council Functions. That's the only one that's potentially dropped out of it. They're currently, the latest information I've had is that they're looking at a 2-year process to potentially look at how that may work or not. So that's the only indication we've had. Everything else that they took the various ministries, they weren't interested in picking any of those other functions up. Yeah.
So that's quite an important process to think about. It was a time and place to think about where things sit nationally, regionally and locally. But it was the level of disinterest from central government, essentially.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So the view was that maybe there's some functions that could be nationalised. I don't think anybody in central government wanted to take over regional council functions. I thought they were adequately managed where they were, sort of out They had enough on their plates of decreasing size of public service to think about without taking on more functions. The way I'd describe this, the compliance monitoring enforcement function has been left on the table. That doesn't seem to be, as something to consider. And education programs, obviously in Virus School, working with Waititi Kuta, with Māori schools, and we work a lot with the particularly primary industries to help them move forward in ways which meet new national regulation that's coming and our own regional policies. In terms of public transport, we're involved with transport planning. You'll have a representative on the regional transport committee helping develop the regional land transport plan. We operate buses, that's the main function, and of course we've had Te Huia running as an interregional train, and it's in its final year service. And so that's principally where a lot of our spend goes, and we're involved with road safety functions. So there's considerations in that environmental space and the transport space. Then there's other catchment functions, flood assets. So we've got about $1 billion worth of assets to manage floods. Think stop banks, big flood pumps in the lower catchments that shift a lot of water very quickly when needed. We've got a lot of drainage systems, and we've got a lot of floodgates to stop the tide coming in the lower parts of regions so it doesn't inundate the land, so they remain productive and protect communities. Those flood assets also protect obviously some urban centres, and as we keep reminding the government, state highways and other roads, the rail network and other infrastructure. So there's that flood management system, which I think the government's really, really keen that any Head Start proposals will consider how that's dealt with. And as I said before, when you manage a flood, you've got to think about the rain that's falling at the top of the catchment and what impact that's going to have when it comes together with other catchments at the lower part of a catchment.
And Chris, would it be true to say that managing the Waipa River as a tributary of the Waikato is an important consideration in that whole equation as well?
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, if you think from Ngā Ruawahia down, that's the big flood risk zone. That's the main flood risk zone. And we're trying to manage water coming down through the hydro dams and the sub-catchments in the Waikato catchment. We're also looking at where the rain's falling in the Waipa catchment and what that flood peaks looks like coming down to try and manage the flood peaks going down to the lower system. We've got lakes that are storage facility that we would divert the river into. We try and channel water in certain directions so it doesn't flood certain areas, and knowing how the flood pumps are working in different areas. So absolutely. As well as that, we do what we call catchment management. So that is where we're trying to manage rivers to keep them in the channels. There's a lot of schemes where there'll be armouring on major bends and rivers throughout the Waikato region. And you know, think of all the tree maintenance. If trees fall down, they block flows, and yes, you've dealt with a lot of this just recently, so I'm sure I don't have to explain how that function works. And land management. So we have a lot of soil conservation schemes throughout the Waikato. There's a lot of land information agreements where for 999 years, you know, on some parts of land you can't change it. They've been planted in certain ways to keep the soil on them there hills to stop it coming down. In the 1950s and 60s in the Taupo region and the Pama soils, there was overnight in rainfall you could get major scouring and erosion issues which would have big impacts on sediment coming down the whole system. We're involved with regional resilience, hazard and adaptation planning, identifying hazards and how we adapt to that, working with local councils and local communities. Emergency response, you'll be familiar with that. We provide a group, you know, what happens across the region for support. In addition to civil defence, we've got marine oil spill responsibilities and so on. We're a maritime agency, so we provide the navigation aids right throughout the region to enable safe use of our waterways, education programs, enforcement. Your district council used to have navigation safety responsibilities for the likes of Lake Karapiro. They were transferred to us 20, 30 years ago or so, and we manage that right across the region. One new responsibility we got last year, end of last year, we didn't really want it, but we were told we're going to get it anyway, was Maritime New Zealand transferred to us the harbour master responsibilities for the Port of Tararoa. And so we now have a harbour master who manages those 3 ships that come in every fortnight to fill up with iron sands. Those ships are New Zealand's biggest maritime risk. They are the biggest ships that come into New Zealand. They tie up to the port, which is a buoy that floats 3.5 kilometres offshore on the wild west coast. So, you know, it's actually quite a big deal, and it's just over there. Iwi partnerships, community support. Look, the things that are in there, the likes, we provide funding for surf lifesaving, Coast Guard, helicopter rescue, whatever. A bunch of district councils in the region used to do it individually, sort of voluntarily every year. They asked us to regionally rate for it and provide it as one, so it was more coordinated. We do that. The other things that sit in there, like where councils decided to support the velodrome in the past, the regional theatre more recently, that's kind of where the funding sits. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the functions. I said I'd just go back and talk about what sits under some of these functions. I'm not going to do it on everything. I've just done it for one to give a snapshot. So we do environmental monitoring. We've got 43 staff, many of who will be out there today, managing a whole lot of things. So we've got over 1,000 sites that we monitor. Typically, we get around every month to try and get trends and work out what's going on out there. In addition to our monitoring, we collate a lot of information that might be collected by yourselves and other organisations. To get a picture of what's going on. And you don't need to worry about the detail on this, but we effectively collate information from a whole bunch of sources and just try and have some clever systems and people who turn it into something that is useful, because we have a lot of data. And we have 37 scientists who look at all that information and try and, you know, work out what is the state of our environment across a number of domains. Some of it we produce reports on, others we are required to report to various agencies. For example, under the Resource Management Act, under National Direction, we have to report on fresh water in certain ways. There's certain standards you've got to do it to, and these pictures are built up nationally to get a national picture of what's going on and affect legislation. Most of this is getting digitally enabled because that's what the world's requiring us to do. And this information, as I say, is apart from statutory reporting, it supports our own policy development, how well our policies are working. It supports our regulatory teams, those who are consenting. You know, is there water to allocate? Can you put discharges in those areas, given that the level of current allocation that they're at with nutrients and so on? You're probably familiar with the iwi in our rohi. There's over 200 hapu, 190 marae. I've just got up there 6 major iwi that we work with, the 5 major iwi in the Waikato Waipa catchment, and the Hauraki iwi. Of course, Hauraki iwi are still awaiting their settlement at large. We were told by Minister Goldsmith that they did expect that settlement to occur in this period of government. Doesn't seem to be happening. Just a few facts on the numbers. We have over $200 million expenditure this year. $72 million of it is in what I'd call the catchment functions. $65 million of it are in the transport functions. I'll show you that breakdown in a minute. That science and policy area, our regulatory area, which is resource use, civil defence and community support. We have a $20 million capital expenditure on top of that, which is mainly related to renewal or new flood assets. We've got a $110 million investment fund, and of that $220 million expenditure, about $150 million comes from rates, the greater portion of which are targeted, and the lesser portion which is general rates. In terms of the catchment functions that you particularly need to consider, there's a bit of a breakdown that shows where we spend in those areas. You can see that flood protection is a big chunk of that pie diagram, along with the catchment functions, which are the river and land management and biosecurity. So they're the biggest expenditure areas. How's it funded? Well, a lot of it you can see is funded through targeted rates. And there's a general rate sting in the tail on everything that we do. If I'm frank, that means that Hamilton City ratepayers contribute significantly to a lot of the works in this area where it's not targeted, because they've got a big, a reasonable portion of the general population. But you and I all contribute towards those catchment functions, either through a targeted rate or also in addition through a general rate. And by district, we can break that down and show that pie diagram. Where does that spend fall mainly? You can see that Waikato district, because of being in lower catchment and with all the big flood protection systems in there, have a big impact. A lot of the targeted rate goes towards there. Hamilton City, particularly through the general rate contribution, but also some targeted within the Hamilton City area. You can see Waipa sitting there. It's at about $6 million coming from this district onto it. Don't worry about the detail in here. This was just intended to show it actually gets quite complicated. If we're going to do some flood protection works, depending on the activity in the lower Waikato, there's all sorts of ways the funding is broken up that contributes to it. Some of it is because of direct beneficiaries. If you own land and you're considered a direct beneficiary, you'll pay a different proportion than, say, if you live up in the Taupo catchment and that you're contributing to the water that goes down the system. That is why there needs to be a flood protection system at the end. It's when we're considering the Head Start proposals, we've got to think, how does this funding mix work if there's going to be a sub-catchment type proposal or a sub-region type proposal? It's just that these are factors that we need to consider into it. Public transport, as I said before, it's largely delivery of bus services, as you can see in the blue. There's rail services and a lesser spend on transport policy. How's it funded? NZTA pays so basically, if you take away the fare recovery, the rest of it is split between NZTA funding 51% and the council through targeted rates funding the remainder of it. So there's fare recovery up there, which is fees and charges. There's the NZTA, which is the government grants, and there's the regional subsidy, which is through targeted rates. Now, obviously, a lot of this is about buses, and a lot of the buses are run in Hamilton. So Hamilton pay a big chunk of this, which you will see on this graph. You can see the central government contribution, the fares at the top, and Hamilton City paying a lot of the targeted rate towards public transport within the region. So that's my overview for your information on regional functions and considerations that go into the Head Start proposals. I'll just pass over to Warren now.
I'll just quickly flick these. Can I
Because-
grab one and pass them along?
Chris, how many unitaries are there in the country?
So there's 5 unitaries in the country. So the unitaries are Gisborne, Nelson City, Tasman District next to it, Marlborough District, and Auckland City. They are the current 5 unitaries. They've all got slightly different models of how they are set up and run, which Warren will probably allude to. I'll leave you to go from here, Warren.
Thanks, Chris. So, yeah, what you see up there is what we have at the moment. So you can see the figures. So it's all based on representation. How many mayors are elected, how many councillors are elected, how many community boards, and that sort of in that space. So obviously that's one of the commentary that's come out of the government. We're over-governed throughout the country in that space. So I don't think there's anyone that's really contradicting that statement as such. So what I've just passed around to you is a little bit of our thought around from our regional view. Obviously, you've just seen through Chris's presentation, we view everything regionally. So this is our thought around a potential single unitary authority across the Waikato and just how it may be made up to make sure you get that representation, as I spoke of earlier, to try and see how we could lift that up through the regions and into that space. So we've looked at a number of those existing unitaries. Obviously, you've got the Auckland Super City model, which has basically it's those local wards come up. They've got 21 that makes up their top table, if you like. And the commentaries you hear back, and some of it is that some of the issues, Rodney Franklin, potentially that voice isn't heard. So amongst the noise of Auckland. So it's one of those things, but I think the Waikato is definitely different. And I think as a large region, we're much more alike. Yes, we've got one big metro, some smaller large towns, and then we come into our rural areas. But I think there's a lot more commonality in our setup. So this is just our thinking. It's by no means the final answer or anything like that. We don't want to come across as Big Brother telling everybody else how to do things. That's not our job. And the government's already recognised that by saying that we can't put in a proposal anyway. So, but it's a talking piece. It's to get you to start thinking potentially what representation may be like. Because as I said earlier, that's the issue that we're hearing. That councils are having difficulty with, communities are having difficulty with. We're starting to see some flavour around the region with councils thinking about a single unitary as one of the options. It'd be interesting to see, we're talking with DIA and that sort of thing, where the councils could come to the Head Start position with maybe a couple of options, because obviously the devil's in the detail when you move into that next section. If you get your proposal accepted in the Head Start, then that's when the hard work starts, when you've really got to get down and work out how do you look to amalgamate things, how's that all going to come together. You guys will be well aware of your functions. You've just had an oversight of our functions. How do you pick all that up and make it work? There's going to be staff issues in that space. There's going to be councillor issues, representation and all that. Government have recognised, I believe, that it is going to take time and it is going to be a longer process. Obviously, they're looking to stand up legislation before that 2028 local election. And it'll be interesting to see just where they land in that space on those councils that have progressed through a Head Start to those that are running into that backstop process in that space. So, yeah, so happy to answer any little questions on the fly that you have. I don't want to take up Craig's time or anything else in that. But so this is our thinking just around what a representation-based structure may look like. We've just populated it with some numbers just to give it a bit of guts to it, so you can sort of have a look and see how that representation might come up through.
Right, thank you guys. That was very comprehensive. We'll get to keep those slides. Yeah, obviously, yeah. So that's been fantastic. All right, so we'll start with Dale Marie and then Les, and we'll just go from there.
Morena.
Morena.
Tell me how you guys, I'm looking at these two boxes on the right here. Consideration should be given to Māori. Da, 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 da. Who helped you with that part?
So far, Chris and I have had a couple of talks with Waikato Tainui, a couple of our other JMA partners, but we're not informing them on what this structure may look like, as in we need their input into it as well. So this is very first draft into that space.
Can I just talk to that, Warren, too? Because some of the feedback that we've had, Dale Marie, and from iwi is pull some structures together, have a think about it, and then come and talk to us about it once you've got a straw man or something, and then come and talk to us. So that's certainly some of the feedback that Mike and I have got.
Yeah, I get that, Steph, and you've told me that before, but I just need to see where this is coming from and who they're talking to when they're putting this together, because this is massive. And I just need to be reassured as an elected member who we are talking to when we're talking about this. And I've got to be honest, Chris, was pretty light on the iwi space, and we do know just how much they put into our relationships and the financial stuff that we put into the River Authority and everything around the space, and how we are relied upon in emergencies and places and things like that when the shit hits the fan. So I acknowledge that we were represented in the slide, but even when we got to treaty settlements, we just went straight over the top. And we're in the slide now, not having to go, but it's just like we're the add-on at the end. When I know how important we are, and that's why the government is reforming everything and attacking one people at the moment. So yeah, I just had to check, because for those of us that are Māori wards at the table that are losing this representation space in 2028, even though in the chaos of this amalgamation, I do have to ask. So it's not a go, but it's just an ask.
Yeah, look, that's fair comment. And I did probably inadvertently slip over talking about iwi partnerships. I was a bit worried about how long I was talking by that point in time. But we do, I mean, we have 5 JMAs. That iwi hold the relationship that they have with the Crown, and it's implemented through us very close and to their chest. And we need to think about how we are going to manage that through any changes and Head Start proposals, how that will be managed. We work with iwi in a whole range of matters. In Lake Taupo, for example, we have a Section 33 transfer to iwi to do some of the environmental monitoring for us, as an example. I think your comment's very fair. When it comes to the representation, our Potohono, Mali Ahapene, who's also our governance lead and does our fair representation, she has been working on putting this together with us. She has a view, because we do have two constituencies in our region currently. She has a view of how Māori could be represented in this model through the elected at large model, and through if there's some other level of local representation, how Māori could be represented. But she's been very clear that we need to talk about that with Māori before we start representing it. And I think, as Warren has said, this is just very early thinking, because if people are going to be thinking about a single unitary option, the fair electoral representation's got to be considered at some point. And so we're just trying to do some early teasing to say, what would it look like if you had regional representation, but local voice is still maintained? That's kind of why you're floating it now, isn't it? That say, potentially there might be a model. This isn't the solution. There's a long way to go, but this is a teaser, I think is the word you used.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we're finding that I mean, councils are talking about it, so, and trying to work out structures. And, you know, when this first kicked off, everybody was around functions and that sort of thing. But, and we'll work out the governance side of it later, once we work out how our functions are all going to come together. That's now changed with the government direction that's come out. And you're looking at form and what that form structure will look like. And then as you move through that gateway, you then start to get into the function side of things and how that works. So, yeah, as Chris alluded, this is the first cut. It's to help councils have that conversation on what form may look like, and with us, and the representation piece that may help bring that together. So that's what's in front of you today.
Sure for that. Liz? then
Yeah, I'm
Roger.
just wondering, has Federated Farmers had any input or comment on this proposal? I know their preference is for territorial authorities.
We've had a number of discussions with Federated Farmers in that space. Their initial proposal, or their initial submission that went to the government on that was one large metro unitary and a large rural unitary for the Waikato region. This sort of conversation is going on in that space. I know Graham's been talking to the Federated Farmers Waikato and working through a potential single unitary and how that may look. Obviously, there's different branches that are involved in that. So they are part of a conversation, larger conversation that's happening.
And without question, they are saying that they don't want the rural voice lost in whatever happens.
Yeah, that came through loud and clear from them. Roger and then Ian.
Yes, may I have two questions? Yes, thank you. Now, the first is, this is an incredibly huge change and impact for the region of the Waikato. We've got an election coming up in October. Are you getting any vibe or any sense of whether there's a degree of cross-party support, or is there a chance that this could all be thrown on the rubbish dump when if we ever have a change of government? I mean, that worries me because there's a lot of energy.
Probably answer it really, really quickly. Tangi Utakeri, who is the spokesman for Labour for local government, spoke down at the LGNZ conference to regional and rural and provincial sectors, etc. Their indication is they wouldn't can it at this stage. They may tweak it, and they're concerned about timeframes. But that's the only basically feedback it has. But certainly haven't heard that they would pull the pin on it.
Good, thank you. Now, an interesting model that you've got here, but my first thought is that we're still using the traditional and historical political entities or geographic entities in terms of Waipa, Taupo, Otorohanga, etc., etc. Was there any thought given to actually throwing all of that out and coming up with a new areas of representation?
No, we haven't based any design on that sort of thinking. I think for my personal opinion is that would actually cloud the issues for communities. I think if you started to redesign all that piece at that level, you would have more difficulty of taking the communities along for the ride than something of a structure that they already understand at a community level, to be able to transfer into something potentially at a larger level. So that would be my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I think if there was a single unitary option that's been considered, I think that the central premise to it is it's just a little bit of a cliche that I often use, and that is that there's a Hamilton voice that kind of is going to want to be heard and not telling everybody what to do, and there's a non-Hamilton voice that wants to be heard and not everyone telling what to do. And we often use the term what's good for the region is good for Hamilton, and what's good for Hamilton is good for the region, because it's got to work. It's got to work together. The same goes with the urban and rural. And so we are aware you could if you're going to have representation at a different level throughout the region, you could cut it in different ways. But I think the rural and the urban voices within those areas still want to be heard as well. And so we're mindful of trying to get fair representation across the region, which is what the current Electoral Act requires anyway. But your point's right, you could cut it in different ways.
Right, thanks for that. Right, Ian?
Yeah, thank you, gents. That's a really excellent presentation and really well thought through and presented. Thank you, appreciate it. My question is more around when we look at the 5 drivers, the government stated 5 drivers for their Head Start. It's a bit weak, truth be told, right? If you were actually looking at that in the balance and you compare it to international efforts of a similar, you look at it and go, it's a bit of a coin toss, really. The economies of scale there isn't any, right? You've still got to have the people do the work, and their own cost benefit analysis says that. So let's just put that one to one side. So really, if you consider all the other 4, it's all about efficiencies. That's actually what this is. And well, the first thing is representation, which we've just talked about. It's critical. What does that governance look like? But the only upside is going to be efficiency. That's the only reason you're going to do it. So my question to you is, in the sort of history of from the regional council, you have that bigger scale. Over time, have you seen those efficiencies sort of come together across those different functions? Have you been able to apply the consistency? Has your headcount gone up or down?
Right, let's answer that. We're going to be succinct.
That's my ask.
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember the number, but the number of catchment rabbit control boards, other pest control boards that were in existence prior to regional council being brought together, there were definitely efficiencies there. We have had headcount increase because of mandates that come through from government mainly, as opposed to our desire to increase. What I would say, the efficiency gained were a single unitary model to be gained, is you've got to start thinking regional functions as not the regional council functions, but what are those functions happening across districts that could come together and be much more efficient, like building services, like roading, like waste management, like dog registration. I'm straying into your space, but that's probably where a lot of the efficiencies will be.
Thanks for that. Right, we've got to be succinct. We are going to finish at 10, so I'll try and get first list, but it's going to be up to the people before you, to be quite blunt. Shane.
Warren, thank you very much. Really appreciate this work, and it's actually the first time I've seen something which makes me feel that the local voice could be heard with this sort of structure. And, you know, I'm a great believer in having one single unitary because of the scale of it. But when I look at your diverse functions under one roof as one regional council, I'm even thinking about, you know, you've got catchment, you've got coastal, you've got biosecurity, you've got flood, you've got transport, whether some of those could be North Island wide and servicing councils that way as well, so that there's actually efficiencies beyond what we're even talking about under this sort of model. Any comments, please?
I'll go quick. I'll go quickly first, but yeah. Look, definitely, we're also part of an organisation called UNISA, which is the Upper North Island Strategic Alliance, and those sorts of things are worked on now. We have another organisation, Te Ura Kaihika, that works regionally, so they actually are looking at it. So a lot of efficiencies region-wide for the country. So Chris sits in that group, so I'll hand over to Chris to give you a little bit more detail around that space, but you're dead right. There is that ability.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Transport might be something that would be better delivered at an inter-regional scale, for example. The flood management, there aren't enough flood modellers throughout New Zealand, so we work together across the country through this other organisation. You know, we've been successful in getting a lot of money out of the government because we've put a proposal together saying, here's the biggest risks for communities from a flood perspective throughout New Zealand. If you take it away from each region, the biggest risk is in Wairoa or Otago or somewhere. We give a prioritised list. The government loves it, so they give you funding. The answer is yes. We've got to think wider than just.
I think even if you expanded that out and you went, and if you had a single unitary in the Waikato, you've got Auckland. If the two of us got together and went to government, you know, understanding how much GDP we do, how much energy, how much everything else, transport corridors, you know, we want a priority spent in this region across those sort of boundaries. That, you know, the implications, the levers there are huge. to be able to pull. And we are always hearing that the government wants to talk to a combined voice. So be that Waikato or be that other regions combined as well.
Yeah, to me, it's the strongest argument for going down this particular track is those sorts of things.
Which feeds into the regional deal thing, how much easier that would be.
Yes.
Right, Monty.
Just on your elected members going down from 200 to 40, is that including the community board layer? It is? Okay, right, okay. So this is pretty much what I imagined, to be honest. It's just that the live question for me is the local area level, whether you cut that more. Because you look at some of these and like the Aotearoa Ward, one person trying to deal with placemaking and community facilities and so on. And so you can see why the people of Aotearoa get nervous. So potentially for me, that could be diced further, but you don't want to lose efficiency and so on. So I don't know, I haven't exactly sort of thought about it. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, fair points and that sort of thing. And obviously, this sort of group is to me is more powerful than a community board. They've got to be resourced. They've got to be doing that stuff at place and all that sort of thing. You've still got, so for me thinking Thames Coromandel, you've still got your residents, ratepayer groups and that sort of thing. And to me, it's quality people around the table. If you can get that next step down and have good quality people, making sure that regional voice is the local voice is being heard, those residents, ratepayers groups, doing stuff that is important to the community, and they've got to be resourced, of course. So there's work in that space. As I say, we cut these numbers on population and representation, but it's a story to tell and sell. So.
Thanks. If you take the green and the blue, it's roughly one councillor per 10,000 people. I think you've probably done it. Yeah. Right, Claire.
Actually, I had the same question as Monty, really. I don't know if you had much thought about, I was actually expecting community boards to have a bigger role because we've been, I suppose, pointed to Auckland's, local boards. So from what you've said, Warren, you sort of imagine the residents and ratepayers sort of taking that space much more correct?
I think more feeding into that layer there that where we show the representation from basically, if you like the regions, the districts, sorry. So again, look, this is our suggestion. You guys work at that layer, a lot better than we do. So, this is us trying to take what's existing now and from representation point, how would it work? But then obviously there's those sorts of conversations that have got to go around in communities.
Yeah. And what's the delegation of functions at that level?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the key. Right, last question, Pip.
Just a very quick one. If you look at the one model that we've got available, which is the sort of the Auckland Unitary Authority, and I get this issue of sort of local effectiveness and global law regional efficiency. Looking at that model, and obviously you probably reviewed it at the outset, it looked like it didn't necessarily produce the efficiencies that were expected. What's your view as to how you maintain effectiveness but obtain efficiencies without creating a bureaucratic mess?
Do you folks want to answer that, or Craig coming up next?
I think that leads beautifully into Craig's presentation.
Thank you, Pip.
Yeah. There's no bus involved running over the top.
All right. Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Warren. Look, really informative. I think we all really enjoyed it. And like you say, it's just another part of a jigsaw, but it just gives us something to actually tangibly start a discussion around. So look, thank you both very much on behalf of us all.
Hey, and thanks, Mike. Thanks for the invite to come. And look, I'm always open to have a chat. So anytime, please just sing out if obviously we've given you some stuff to chew over. So yeah, any further thoughts or anything like that, as I say, potentially not the co-pilot seat, but want to be up there and helping you guys get to a good decision. So thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Right. All right. So, hey, we will welcome up, we've got Craig Hobbs and Priscilla Balkarushan. Priscilla? Yes, Chief of Staff. All right, so you're right. So Craig is CEO of Waikato District Council, and Priscilla is Chief of Staff to the Mayor, I'm assuming.
Mayor
To the Chief Executive. Ooh, right, flash.
Yeah. Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Mayor Mike. Appreciate that. Kia ora, councillors. Nice to be here. CE Steph. Just perhaps as a bit of context, this presentation is very much my own opinion. It's not the opinion of Waikato District Council. Having said that, we are probably leaning toward a regional unitary as a council, or our councillors are, looking at other options as well. But I guess I was asked to do a presentation to the Mayoral Forum a couple of weeks ago based on my experience at Auckland Council, and I guess a whole lot of data that Priscilla and her team had pulled together, which we're now sharing with the region, all the regions. So we're working off the same data sources. The CEs are very much aligned around how we think about this at an operational level. I think the challenge for me, though, is very much the governance question, and I'll come back to that, and how you manage that, maintaining local voice and iwi representation, catchment management, all those sorts of things. In terms of my background, to give you context to that, so I was CEO at South Waikato District Council from 2013 to 18, then moved to Auckland Council, where I was for 5 years Director of Regulatory Services. To give you an idea of scale, I had 1,600 staff, $230 million revenue, so and contributed about $20 million back to our reserves or to overheads every year. So just gives you an idea, and you can't compare Auckland Council with any other council or unitary, whatever we come up with, just because of the scale. But we can certainly talk about, I guess, the opportunities that presents. Priscilla's here really just in support and to hear your feedback as well, because she is helping coordinate the program as a whole on behalf of all the councils. So I've got the clicker. Let's see if I can drive it. So I really wanted to start with, and as I'm going to be a little bit opinionated here and might upset a few people potentially, but I guess it's just to stimulate some conversation. If we look at the Waikato today, just starting there, and Chris and Warren have probably covered a lot of this already, but as a population, 532,000 people. So again, can't compare it with Auckland, 1.7 million, but it's a sizable population. Land area, and I'm not going to go into those numbers because you've probably covered them, but if you look at the bottom there, I think what is relevant is in terms of urban population, so people living in Hamilton as well as the urban settlements around the Waikato, 360,000 people, and in the rural communities, 134,000. Obviously quite a contrast in terms of the land area, but that's a 2/3, 1/3 split. So it gives us, I think, some confidence, hopefully, that we're not going to lose the voice of the smaller provincial areas or district council areas and so on. But the governance piece will be critical to this. We obviously still have a shared services CCO and the 2 water CCOs, and wouldn't it have been marvellous if government had a thought about setting up an amalgamation conversation ahead of water entities, but there we go. The next slide is around the governance structures. Again, won't go into too much detail there, other than I do think that this amalgamation gives us an opportunity to consider the representation. And Māori wards, we lost ours at Waikato District Council at the last election, which was a bit of a surprise, but they are still in play in different areas. That could be part of the proposal being put up, as you maintain a Māori voice, particularly when you consider Minister Watt's letter of the last couple of days around representation and having to be an elected member to be able to have a vote. I don't know what that means for your Independent Audit and Risk Committee Chair, which I think we assume you have, we do as well. We lose those opportunities as well. In terms of revenue, looking at the finances down there, so $1.8 billion of revenue comes in through rates into all our councils. We spend about 1.6. These figures are as close as we can get, and they are last year's figures, and we have debt of 2.3 billion. The revenue is interesting, and I'll come back to that, but the smallest 5 councils in the Waikato have total revenue of 300 million. It's not a lot of money to do what you need to do, and I reflect back on my South Waikato days. We had staff of 130 staff and a $30 million budget to try and manage everything you have to do in local government. And with waters coming out, I mean, really those councils are pretty much unviable in my opinion. Iwi, Dale-Marie, your questions earlier on, had a conversation with Tuku and Donna just earlier on today. Tuku has offered to be a mediator, moderator, facilitator of all iwi around what coming together for the Waikato might mean. And we've also now got a representative nominated to be part of our operational working group, which I think is really healthy. Water catchments, I'm not going to go into that. Chris and Warren would have covered that a lot better than I could do. But again, I think the reason I put those slides in is because of the complexity of our district. It's complex anyway, and all those different communities are dealing with 11 different authorities at the moment. So we manage the complexity in an even more complex operating environment in my mind. So I think, and I am an advocate for a regional unitary. I think the ability to have one voice and one point of contact makes a lot of sense in my mind across all those different areas. We just have to be very mindful of the implications of catchments of iwi, rohe, and so on. But I think that's certainly not insurmountable in my mind. Coming back again to, and I've repeated it 3 or 4 times, what is the governance mix? How do we actually make sure we don't lose sight of the local voice? How do we make sure that we don't get dominated by Hamilton as a metro? Just a couple of figures in here I think is interesting. Our GDP is not bad. We're 4th ranked in the country behind Auckland, Wellington and Canterbury. 9% of New Zealand's total, 4th ranked, but we're actually quite weak if you look at it on a per capita basis. And a lot of that, the mix of what we do here. But I think, again, there's strength in thinking more spatially and systemically around how we operate as a region. Again, I won't go into too much more detail on that. We can come back to questions at the end. This slide is based on the data we've put together, and this is evolving all the time. We're validating it with other councils, and in fact, it's moved on quite a bit in terms of the way we're presenting it. So we've created, Priscilla's team have created a database where any council can go in and sort of cut and dice the numbers that are available to us around employment, GDP, Maori, Pacifica representation or voice, productive land, how that works and so on. So again, a lot of the information we've drawn on from Waikato Regional Council. But when you look at that, we have an interesting mix of debt. Now, debt is only one factor in terms of, or when you sort of talk debt, the other consideration is what is the state of our assets, and we're trying to get a handle on that at the moment. So one thing we have determined through the data, and we'll make this available later on as well, is that we actually have good debt in the Waikato generally. There's only one council that's perhaps on the verge of being perhaps not as financially sustainable, and that's TCDC in terms of debt versus depreciation versus all the other metrics you look at around debt. But we're actually in a pretty good space. And our asset quality, we're still trying to get on top of that, but again, it's not too bad. But quite an interesting mix of different debt per housing unit when you look at that. One thing we are doing at the moment through Priscilla's team is trying to get a harmonised debt view. So if we did end up as a regional unitary, what would that look like and the impact on our households in different areas. We're also trying to get a unified look at harmonised rate view. A lot more difficult because of the different complexities of rating and how we apply it. One thing I would say here is Auckland Council, when the Super City was set up, didn't go straight to a harmonised rates model. They took time to evolve to a level and sort of staggered it over time, so the impact wasn't so great on areas where there was a greater impost. Interesting thing, sorry about this too, is the population growth, and we've been high growth for a long time. The last 12 months we've actually slowed down. Now the economy's obviously slowed down as well, but it'll be interesting to see whether that's an ongoing trend or not.
When were those figures taken?
That was 2025. Yeah. I always think systemically, and one thing I don't think we do well currently in the Waikato, my own opinion, is that we tend to think parochially around our own little areas. We don't think about what we contribute to New Zealand Inc. And we have a huge amount of power behind us in terms of our collective voice. And when you look at the things that we are important to New Zealand Inc. for, energy, I think, Chris, you'll have a number, it's 30-odd%, I think, of the energy that we contribute to New Zealand. the dairy and agriculture, we're obviously the kingpin in that in terms of our position in New Zealand's ecosystem. The Maori economy is huge in this part of the world. There's so many different levers we could pull that gives us a voice. And I think the other thing that I'd point out there is the Auckland overflow. Auckland can't function properly without the Waikato, and vice versa for that matter. But we are, it would collapse under its own weight if the Waikato wasn't here and functioning well. So the strategic opportunity, if we did go to a regional unitary, is that ability to really advocate for infrastructure investment. We don't have a strong, I use the example when I was Director of Regulatory Services in Auckland Council, I could pick up the phone to a minister or a CEO of an agency and get a phone call back straight away or have a direct conversation. In my role as CEO at Waikato District Council, I don't get a return phone call when I make those. So, it's an awkward position. You just don't have that strength. Growth management negotiations, we are significantly growing as a regional have been, and the ability to leverage that growth and how we talk to central government as one voice would be really, really critical. Water and RMA reform influence, spatial planning, those things that are being imposed on us anyway. How do we think about leveraging that opportunity across the region? And one thing I don't think government's thought about very well is if you think back to the old provincial councils in New Zealand way back in the day and the power they had at a central government level. You imagine if we had, say, 8 or 9 or 10, whatever it might be, regional unitary authorities across the country and the power of that collective voice back into government. And, Wayne Brown, we've had quite a bit of experience with. Wayne is an interesting character, but one thing he's been able to do is leverage the weight and power of Auckland at a government level. And I believe that would have that same sort of voice and leverage. I put this slide in here because one thing I think, and again, personal opinion, might be divisive, is we're very, very parochial in New Zealand. We're always thinking about why we're special. Reality is, I think, in the region as a whole, people relate to these regardless of where they live in the Waikato. They're the icons, the things that really do resonate to what people who call themselves Waikato residents. I don't think it necessarily goes to an individual thing that we point to all the time as our identifying feature. So the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that as a region collectively, we all resonate and relate to this. So I'll carry on. So what might amalgamation solve? Again, and look, I will come back to a slide. At the end of the day, every time I look at what we deliver, it should be looked at through the lens of our customers and our ratepayers and residents. What are we actually delivering for them? I will use some examples, though, that are quite regulatory heavy because of the background that I have. But in terms of customer experience, if we think about the customer journey at a local government level, we deal with someone from their dream of building a house. They might need a resource consent, they'll need a building consent, they'll get a CCC at the end of the day, they'll need to have an engineer get involved in that somewhere. They'll have a dog potentially, that has to be registered. They'll use a library. Back in the day, we used to look after the hairdressers and so on, make sure they were right. If you had your hair cut, we were looking after those sort of things. The environmental health component of making sure we keep people safe, all those things impact our residents. But we tend to think of them in local government, I believe, in silos. So you get a building consent, you get a resource consent. How do we think about that customer journey as a whole? And a lot of our people are very mobile within our region. You think of Thames Coromandel and Taupo with their holiday homes and so on. So how do we give them one level of experience? How do we keep one view of the customer and start being proactive around the way we service them? Amalgamation would give us that opportunity. Variability of quality and decision making. And if I come back to my regulatory days, I used to get, I'd always hear how frustrated people are about dealing with the Waikato District Council versus Waipa and Hamilton. And we all do it terribly according to the developers and so on, and probably do in some cases. But how do we give them one level of experience? And the ability to reduce duplication and get one system that supports developers is huge. We built a system in Auckland Council that one small example, reduced upload times of consent applications from 17 minutes to 30 seconds. That equated to a $1.25 million financing reduction cost to Auckland Inc. because of the time saving to those developers, 22,000 consents a year. So, you can start being clever and start delivering real value back to your customers if you have consistency around your systems and the way you work. Limited resilience and capability. You here had a major event a month or two ago, which put all sorts of pressure on you. I think we had 35 staff out of Waikato District working either here or in other areas. We brought people together anyway to have to do it, but it's bringing people together and then trying to get organised. If we had one view of the world, I think we'd be able to mobilise a lot quicker and make decisions a lot better around resilience. And we do struggle to share our resources currently the way we operate. So opportunities again, that the power of the combined balance sheets. If we look at Auckland, one thing I would say here is that if I use Franklin as an example, up until probably 3 or 4 years ago, Franklin the ex-Franklin district, which is now part of Waikato District, hated being part of Auckland. The reason being is they got no resource. So they had a community board that had some power in terms of when the library opened, the pool opened and things like that. It's only been the last couple of years with the growth in South Auckland that they're starting to get money invested into them. And now all of a sudden they're quite happy with Auckland. The problem you face or we all face, and whether we have one unitary or a whole lot of small disparate councils, is where do you allocate that funding? And we will always be robbing Peter to pay Paul. I said to my council and to the Mayoral Forum when we met, there's 2 things have to change in New Zealand, in my opinion. One is we have bigger authorities and we start using the economies of scale, or alternatively, government changes the funding model for us. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the split of rates versus taxes in New Zealand, but public money, 92% comes from taxes, only 8% comes from rates. So, we're never going to have enough money under the current scheme, but at least if we had a consolidated balance sheet, we could start applying money where it's appropriate at any given time. You'll still leave some communities behind for periods. One operating system I've talked to, aggregated contracts for service delivery, pros and cons in that. Yes, you can get some economies by doing greater contracts across a whole region. By the same token, you could end up leaving some of your smaller suppliers behind. So that's something you'd have to think about in terms of the way we set up an operating model. How do you maintain that local identity, that local investment, but get economies of scale as well? We wouldn't need a collab at the end of the day. Well, different people have different opinions on collab, but you wouldn't need a shared service function because it'll work out of the one unitary authority. We would have we'd be doing one LTP across the whole region rather than 11 at the moment. We'd have one set of audit fees. I'm not sure what yours are at the moment. I think ours are about 400,000 or thereabouts. So, rather than duplicate that, there's at least a saving there. And it's small fry in the scheme of the total balance sheet, but it all adds up. Consistent economic enablement, I think planning, consenting, licensing, at the end of the day, our developers and people looking to invest in our region would have one set of rules to follow and consistent delivery around that. And that view of the customer I talked about before. The numbers at the bottom there is, again, in the scheme of $1.8 billion of revenue, they're not huge, but if you reduced, and sorry, Steph, the current 11 Cs down to 1, and again, I apologise for any second tier managers sitting in the room, if we reduced from the 44 current tier 2 across all the region down to 6 or 8, there's a saving of $10 million straight away. These are the challenges that you need to consider, and that is that there's no doubt that Auckland councillors have a less of a profile or ability to connect with their communities because of the scale and size of their areas. The Pakuranga Community Board, I think, is if you looked at it in scale against cities and district councils, it'll be number 3 or 4 in terms of population. But community boards devolving responsibility and accountability and funding down to them would be critical in my mind to make this work. The loss of community voice, which we've heard a lot of, how do we make sure that every community is heard and is not left behind? Not easy to do. We are a huge region. So Waikato District Council is 80% the size of the Auckland area. That's just our council. So the region as a whole is massive, and it would be awkward to manage that. Having said that, you'd use a hub and spoke model. You'd have the outlying offices wouldn't change. you'd still have staff on the ground and staff who are familiar with areas in different areas, but they'd work under one common brand. And the critical thing to this, really, to my mind, is not so much the way you structure your tier 2, tier 3 or whatever, it's actually how you work, the ways of working. And I say there, the cultural barriers and parochial attitudes. In Auckland, we used to get it all the time, where a building and sending team working out of Manukau would do it the way that Manukau had always done it, different to the way North Shore had done it, the way that Waitakere had done it. So overcoming that and driving through ways of working is a critical piece of this. There is no doubt that it costs a lot of money to set up a new entity. We're going to face that anyway. There will be extra costs coming into this, and we will have to let go of a whole lot of things like you think about going to one operating system, money we've all invested in our ERP systems. Reality is they are sunk costs, and you just have to let them go. It's a difficult thing to do. I referenced earlier on the 300 million across the 5 smallest councils. Reality is 41% of the region's revenue comes from Waikato Regional Council and Hamilton City. The power of that balance sheet is pretty critical. And while we might, be concerned about the power of the metro overtaking, dominating conversations, as say their revenue and being able to apply that across all the whole region is pretty powerful. So lessons from Auckland, just quickly running through this. I've mentioned Wayne Brown and his influence in Wellington. A really powerful mayor representing the Waikato, I think, would have equal influence. Being able to advocate back to central government. Strategic planning, we're already being forced into that through the spatial planning rules. So we have to have one view of the region anyway. It'd be a lot easier if we weren't having to have 11 different teams coming together to manage that. Talked about the power of the balance sheet in terms of funding capital programs and the likes. And again, Warren and Chris could talk to this better than I can, but that integrated land use and transport strategy, thinking about how we connect into the different airports, different ports of, marine ports and so on, is really, really critical. And economic development, we can reduce complexity, we can make life easier for our developers, we can really start driving investment into areas in the region that we think it's best invested into, whether that be energy, whether it be highly productive land, whether it be marine aquaculture and economic development and so on. And some of the things that Auckland Council delivered, I won't read those out to you. We've touched on some of them already. But sitting at the ELT table up there in 2023, we were presented with a really strong financial business case around the savings that had been achieved through the model, the Super City model. $1.89 billion was the estimated savings. Now, I will point out these are unaudited numbers. These were numbers that were put together by the internal staff. And it took time to get there. It was probably year 3 or 4 before we started seeing savings. Up to then, there'd been quite considerable extra costs incurred. But the opportunities, the savings that it presented were really, really considerable. And that 2.4 billion is where they think they're at now. Again, even if it's close, it's a pretty big number. So I think that's my presentation. It is. More than happy to take questions and.
Right. Thank you, Craig. And Priscilla, I can see he's got you doing plenty of work behind the scenes, so thank you for that also.
You look good every day.
All right, so we've got Ian and then Pip. All right, I'll let you go.
Thanks for that, Craig. Appreciate it.
Please.
In terms of, I was actually one of your slides where it was the opportunities that amalgamation presents, sort of 4 boxes on there. Look, I'm leaning in the direction that you're talking about, but looking at it from the other side, what's the evidence that you actually need to amalgamate to do that, as opposed to just having some really good operational cleanliness within existing operations?
Can I get you to perhaps just repeat that? I'm sort of not quite sure.
Yeah, so I forget what the 4 boxes were that were the opportunities for amalgamation. Said, we should amalgamate because it will let us do this, improve efficiencies and so on and so forth. That's the one, exactly. I looked at it and I went, yes. Then I turned around and said, well, yeah, but couldn't you just do that by running a better business? Like, why is it that amalgamation must happen to enable those?
Yeah, I think the biggest things for me is around duplication and the customer experience. If we put ourselves in the shoes of our ratepayers, I haven't come across a council yet that's got great customer satisfaction scores out of our residents and ratepayers. We're not seen to be as effective as we should be. I think a lot of that because we don't have the economies of scale to do what we need to do. And the trade-off for you as elected members, quite often when you look at your long-term plan and annual plan, is what do you put back into your community versus what do you put back into your systems and make life easier for our customers. We have done some work in our council around a transformation program that has identified 60 different systems in our council. A lot of those are hardwired in, a lot of them are software as a service. They don't talk to each other. There's duplication. We've got data everywhere, it's fragmented. We can't make good business decisions. So I think taking a more commercial view and a more joined up, consolidated view would make life a lot easier for our customers. I think the decision making. So, I hear all the time that it's a lot easier to do business in Waipa because you make decisions a lot quicker, or you perhaps work in the grey area of our legislation. We work at the other end. So how do we start thinking about getting consistency into that to make life easier? Again, I made the comment earlier on, one of the challenges is where do you invest your money at any given time? And if you look at the size of our region as a whole, we have major resilience issues at the moment because of climate change and so on. So how do you make a decision to put money into Port Waikato, for instance, because it's falling into the sea versus flooding in Waipa? But those are the sort of decisions that you have to make. But it gives you a greater opportunity, I think, to address those issues because your balance sheet's that much stronger.
Thanks for that, Craig. And of course, Waipa does not work in a grey. Right. Yeah.
I come from regulatory services, Mike.
I won't give my personal opinion. Right, Pip.
Understand your sort of the logic of you take, let's say, however many tier 2 positions we have down to 6 or 8 with a sort of a combined region. But my perception is in Auckland, for example, what you then had was a proliferation of, positions sub that, because you had managers who are managing managers who manage management people who then manage projects, and you then end up with a sort of a proliferation of seemingly hundreds of people earning very large amounts of money just running the machine. So in that situation, how do we stop that effectively diseconomies of scale as opposed to the economies of scale that theoretically you should produce, but in practice seem never to happen?
I think there's two answers to that question. The first one, I think there is a perception that Auckland Council is very heavily weighted to the top. I would disagree with that. If I look at our building consenting department in Auckland Council, we had 1 GM and 4 tier 2 managers below him, if you like, for a staff of 600. So you actually do reduce it. And I think the other thing I'd say, again, using Waikato District Council as an example, we go down 8 layers, I think at the moment, 8 or 9 layers in terms of, the various different hierarchy. Auckland Council, we got it down to 6. So there was a lot flatter structure, a lot more people at the coalface. I think that comes down to leadership. Comes down to, and this is where, as you transition, you need a really strong mayor. If you went to a regional, you need a really strong CE. And I think my mind, again, my own personal opinion, is you'd probably set up a transition state for 3 or 4 years, and those 2 people would be really, really unpopular. You'd drive through the change, and then you step back and let someone come in and consolidate it.
Right. Very good. I was going to say, it sounds like good cop, bad cop, but it's just like bad cop, bad cop. All right. Roger.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. And I look back and I think that the waters transition has been an interesting experience to go through. And I think from those I speak to, the ultimate objective of that is to have a whole of a Waikato's water entity. But we finished up with the transitional stage where we've gone to 2 separate entities. From a central government perspective, do you think that they're going to be interested in having any form of transition, that they'll have a mindset of saying one change and that's going to be it? And we're seeing, of course, already there are talks of DCs within the Waikato are looking at different options. Do you think realistically that they'll be allowed to consider those, that the central government's perspective will be one entity, that's it, one change, here we go?
I guess you're asking me to look into a crystal ball, and if any of us could understand what central government are doing at the moment, if that's a very flippant remark, but I do struggle with what's going on personally. I think and this is where it gets interesting, because you've got DIA officers saying one thing and ministers saying another thing in the background, so it's hard to know exactly where they're at. I've also been told that I've been told things that I've been told would not be shared in the public arena. So to your question, my own personal opinion is I think there will be a forced coming together. So collectively, and this is where it gets difficult because we've got so many different entities making their own decisions, but I would suggest that if we got to a point where we had a scale that was quite significant, for instance, most of the councils agreed to a regional unitary and there were 3 or 4 that sat out of it, I would anticipate central government would be saying, I think you have to come in and join that coalition. That's a personal opinion. And we're sort of hearing those whispers in the background. And we know that government wants us to come with one proposal per consolidated group, ideally. They have told us that they don't want a whole lot of options. They don't want us to go with 4 options and say we could be this, that, or the other. They want one, but potentially if we thought that wasn't going to fly, then maybe there would be a backup option available that they would consider.
Yeah. But I mean, and again, we've already got future-proof, as you know,
Yes.
and that includes Matamata Piakau, which apparently might be thinking of their own thing. So that kind of concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, Claire, and then Les.
Thanks. Yeah, really interesting what you've sent to us today. I want to explore about the local voice. And you've made 2 comments during your presentation, Craig. One was that it's important for the local voice to be heard and that we wouldn't leave communities behind. And then at another point, you've said there will be trade-offs and sometimes the money will go somewhere and some communities will be left behind or have to wait. So I'm part of a ward where we're a rural ward, and we often get left behind in the fact that it's difficult to get funding allocated for local projects. And so is there any way that you can give me reassurance that there is a mechanism where you can protect local investment or local funding, but on at one scale, whereas on the other hand, you're taking the broader view where, we're looking at the whole region and there are definitely priorities that, you mentioned Port Waikato and stuff like that. So is there any way that you've thought it could be balanced nicely?
I think this is the biggest challenge, Councillor. I think operationally it's easy to say, hey, we can get economies and we can bring it all together. That's the simple bit. The difficult bit is the governance and that local voice. I am a fan of empowering local communities, and I think that you do that through investment. Now you'd have to put guardrails in because there's obviously it's public funding, but if a local community knew that they had X amount available and could make their own decisions around that at a local level, and I think that's something government have asked us to consider, is what's the local representation opportunity versus the regional. So transport, waste, things like that you could look at regionally, but things like your local community halls, your pools, your things like that could perhaps potentially be more devolved down. I don't have an answer for you, but I think that is really the tricky part. And I think we do need to go into whatever we put into government needs to talk at a high level, roughly what our aspirations would be, but we're never going to get to the detail in a short period of time.
It's probably part of that storming bit that comes after September to May, or, that sort of that detail. Les.
You just might want to give your personal opinion on this. Under the central government at the moment, there's a greater push for the use of public-private partnerships in government. And with you being a super council, what is the future? Do you see the use of public-private partnerships by international corporations? As under the LGA, councils must consult if their agreement affects control of a strategic asset.
Again, I'm quite opinionated, so I apologise. You're hearing the world as according to Craig Hobbs, but we're a country of 5 million people. We're a big country, so geographically we're quite isolated, obviously we're spread. 5 million people is the size of an average city in most countries of the world, and yet we are very, very parochial. And I think if we can't bring the private sector into this conversation, we're not going to go anywhere. And again, that's in my mind a joined up conversation with central government. We're not on the same page. We serve the same citizens, yet we tend to do things in isolation. And, the New Zealand Superannuation Fund won't invest in New Zealand because of the quality of our decision making in the short term, 3-year timeframes. They're the most effective sovereign wealth fund in the world. They're one of the biggest investors into infrastructure in North America, but they won't deal with New Zealand. So I think we have to start thinking about how we put all those different partners into the room. Government have been quite clear that they're saying that they wouldn't expect any road to be built in New Zealand now without it being a toll road. So public-private partnerships. I mean, that's a bit scary to us, but reality is that's the state of the nation. And if I look at, again, using Auckland as an example, so one thing that most people don't appreciate in Auckland is that only 40% of Auckland's council's revenue is rates, 60% is user pays. So they're actually, the cost goes to where people are getting the services, and that's something else that would have to be considered through this model.
Thanks, Craig. Ian.
Yeah, another question around your Auckland Council experience, actually. My experience across 7 countries, I recognise your parochial comment, although I'm a very proud Kiwi at this point. Successful organisations are made by culture and people, irrelevant of their size and scale. What was the story of that in the super city of Auckland, and how did that support that? Was it just a reset? Any advice for what we're doing as we're looking at this current challenge?
Yeah, I made mention of the cultural parochialism with the old cities, the old structure, and people still reflecting on that. I keep referring to us because Priscilla was my right hand at Reg Services in Auckland, so quite pleased to have her working with me here. We turned Reg Services around in 5 years, and a lot of that was driving culture. That when we walked in there, it was losing money significantly. We had really bad customer experience. We worked on the culture piece significantly, and that comes back to that leadership and establishing ways of working and not allowing people to work under their own little auspices or working around the system, finding workarounds and so on. It can be done. I think leadership again is critical here, and holding people to account. And a lot of that, I think, in my mind, again, well, according to Craig Hobbs, is how you empower your staff, how you give them the opportunity, the autonomy, but giving them the guardrails of what's expected and holding them to account.
Quick follow on positing this. A lot of it does come down to the quality of those leaders. So in my thinking, that is one of the upsides of amalgamation, which is that you have a larger organisation, which is more attractive to those people you might need to be those leaders.
Totally agree. I mean, if I look at the lead team when I was on it at Auckland Council, I was probably the exception. But we had doctors, we had people who'd run major healthcare entities, CEOs that were in director roles. The Auckland Council legal team is regarded as the best in-house legal team of any business in New Zealand. The last 2 general consuls have both become High Court judges straight out of Auckland Council. So it gives you an idea of the quality of people you can employ.
Any more questions? Any more questions? I mean, we've still got Craig and Warren here too. Yeah, I go for it.
Can I please get my mains fixed outside 7 King Street since I got the two big people here? Kia ora.
Could you talk to your local community board?
I
and get that?
have. I'm on there. Kia ora.
So Chris and Warren are still here as well. Any other questions you sort of thought of in the meantime, regional wise, or? So yeah, culture, what is it? Eat strategy for lunch or breakfast, sorry. Yeah, that sort of, one experience, one system, and probably one system first, and the experience is going to be as probably good as the culture that you build. Yeah, sort of has come through quite importantly.
Can I just jump in sorry, I apologise for jumping, but I think, and again, word according to Craig Hobbs, I work to the 6 Bs. And that is, we need to think big. And that's not about big in terms of scale. It's about how we think about changing the dial and actually bringing people into, doing things better for our constituents. We should borrow, because there's a lot of, things that we're not unique. So there's stuff out there we can find and bring in. We should build on what we do well currently. And a lot of, every council does things really, really well. So how do we take the best of that? We want our people to be bold. At the end of the day, we employ people with skills and experience and life experience and so on that can deliver into our organisations. We need to give them the voice and the opportunity to try things. They need to be brave, because that's the only way we'll learn, is if we make mistakes and we'll learn from it. But the last thing, and this is why I jumped in, is we need to brag. And we don't tell people how well what we do and how well we do it in local government. And we're not a marketing entity. I agree, I understand that, but we do have comms teams. And how do we actually share what we do well, so that our residents understand the value of what we deliver, but also our kaimahi can be proud of who they represent and what they do in their communities.
For that. We just had a bit of a session on the comms part yesterday, actually, as a group. Look, hey, thank you very much. We're finished a bit early, so welcome to stay for morning tea. I'm sure it'd be good to have some one-on-one chats also. So look, both presentations, look, thank you very much. It's been super informative. And that when we made this decision, I know, for instance, Ian was away, for instance, so, it'd be, like we've even got Ian's opinion on how our tentative thoughts were in our workshop. So on behalf of us all, thanks again. You're there to pick up the phone. The CEs are doing some work. The data that comes through is going to be really important for us, and we're sort of looking forward to that. I think the mayors are meeting again sometime later this month, and we'll bring that information back to our tables. So yeah, anyone out there, I guess, in the community looking at this or sharing this, it's just part of the journey of trying to share what is happening around local government in New Zealand. It is directed from the government. We can't sit here and do nothing. We've got an obligation to be thinking about this and to actually put something in if we're going to do a head start by August the 9th, which is what we're trying to do. Roger.
Questions just come to mind. If I might ask, we're currently having discussions about how do we go out and get community feedback on the options so that we involve the community in our how are you doing it?
We're challenged by the same concern or issues you have. Obviously, we've had this opinion out of Simpson Grierson that says we have to follow the Local Government Act. Significance engagement comes into play and so on, and we just don't have time to really engage properly. So we're not talking about engagement, we're talking about communication and trying to share information. We've got questionnaires out there at the moment, both hard copy and online. So we're asking for feedback around, what services do people value? Would they be comfortable with a bigger authority or not? It's quite a high level one, and more than happy to share that. In fact, I think a lot of them have gone around already, Steph, from various councils. So we're sort of piggybacking off everyone else's work and just trying to engage as best we can. We have included the conversation as part of our LTP conversations, because we're out in June anyway with early engagement. So we're having a joined up conversation without trying to confuse the issue. We also have a number of different forums like Toitui Marae and so on, where we're putting it on the table there as well. Pokai, we anticipate we'll be talking to Pokai about what's going on. So we're taking every opportunity to make it as public as possible.
Nice, that's good. All right, team. Hey, we've got a little bit of time. We're due back. What time are we due back? I think about probably quarter past 11. So we've got a decent morning tea break, which is just next door. Thank you, folks. And hey, this next bit may or may not take 30 minutes, but it's just to give a bit of an update, which is really off the back of that discussion before the meeting started today. So we'll start off with Steph. I'll add in where appropriate, but things are moving at pace, you can tell, and there's a bit happening in the background as well. So I'll let Steph kick off there.
So I'm conscious we're back online too. So to the public, just really important conversation. Really glad, happy to hear over the morning tea break that those sessions were really valuable for you. We can get those presentations. We've set up, if we haven't already, we're setting up a receptacle for you to put all of the information we find into one place and diligent for you so that you can at your leisure go and reread presentations. I've got other things coming in from Australia, amalgamation and de-amalgamation. We've got that LGNZ report from 2011 on shared services, all sorts of things. So we'll put those presentations into that place for you. I hope that was really useful in terms of understanding the regional council context, complexity and scale, and what that means in terms of what a unitary would look like. The next steps for us, as I've said, are that the CEs are working collaboratively to pull the teams together to start to form the basis for those proposals. We're very aware that the communities and you as elected members will expect to be able to do some optioneering to look at the basis for our options. We need to, in building our own team internally, our next conversation will be, when do we bring you a formal paper? So there's a communications plan that needs to run out, and so we start communicating with our community, and Lisa is leading that work as we speak, and we hope to go live with that very shortly once we've run it past Bear Mike and yourselves. And then we will need to bring a formal paper to you to actually, in public, in a formal meeting, confirm your preferred options. And that will give us the directive to go away and do the optioneering on what I understand to be your three options. So the single unitary, potentially the future-proof model, and that may or may have parties opt in or opt out, and our and Waikato Waters associated councils. There is a lot of work to be done to build one proposal. There's a lot of work to be done if we want to, to go into the same depth to look at three. So what we need to do is give you really good advice and recommendations and options about how far do we go before we land on a preferred option, and then we build that. And obviously, whatever our preferred option is, we'll be building that proposal with the councils associated with that model. And that means that working collaboratively, sharing resources, building consistent databases are all, using consistent data, will be really important. On Tuesday, Mayor Mike and I will be in a meeting with the Waikato Mayoral Forum and Minister Watts. So he's asked to meet with us after we've had the launch of Waikato Waters on Tuesday morning, which the Minister is doing formally at Cambridge Wastewater Treatment Plant on Tuesday morning. I need to check in with the invite about that. So that's made a mental note to self. But the Minister has asked to meet us to check in with where the Waikato Head Start conversations are at. And it's a great opportunity for us to not only share what our thinking is, but probably to ask a number of questions of clarification of the Minister and seek some further information. Kia ora, Roger.
Yeah, those two presentations this morning were incredibly interesting. And I think we all found that. Is there a chance that we get a similar opportunity with Hamilton City so that we can, because they're going to be a major force in this? I'd love to have the opportunity for,
yeah, sure.
for that.
A presentation about Hamilton City and what they do and who they are. Or... Yes, from them about who they are and about their operating model and
what they see.
Right. Okay, so they have agreed in public, I think, to 4 options. They've been shared. I can share those with you. They're working their way. They've built a team internally to do the analysis on that, but obviously they're collaborating with all of us, and they're working to understand the information to consider those 4 options. And a single unitary is one of those options. I can share that with you though, Rod. Yep, no problem.
Can you just explain when you said future-proof model? What do you actually mean by that, please?
So when we had our discussions and we were thinking about the options that you'd like us to consider further to bring back to you, a proposal for a unitary covering Waikato District, Hamilton City and Waipa. Now, Matamata Piako is part of Future Proof, and they would need to decide whether they would opt into that proposal or not. Yep,
But
does that make sense?
I think what we talked about is Matamata Piaka would, future proof would be future proof. And if anyone wanted to opt out, it would be up to them to opt out. Please.
Hey, I'd just like to go on the record. Over 100 organisations from 14 countries attended the New Zealand Infrastructure Investment Summit held in Auckland in March of 2025 to promote public-private partnerships as a key delivery mode for New Zealand. Investors represented $16 trillion in capital. The strategic signal was New Zealand is open for business. I have major concerns that these, this Facebook has just come up on my statement. Apparently we can't afford it. I have major concerns that these super councils will enter into long-term supply and delivery contracts with global organisations over strategic assets with the flight of financial returns overseas. Thank you.
Thanks, Les, and we'll note your concerns. I think it's really important to remember too, so I note your concerns, and those are concerns that you've raised on multiple occasions, Les, and I acknowledge them again. I think what we need to be reminded of or keep mindful of, and you heard Craig say it again this morning, is that the proposal to government by 9th of August is actually very high level. And with the templates just come out to have a look at in terms of what they're looking for in the proposal. And it's the work that will be done between the September and March next year, if your proposal is accepted by Cabinet, where there's a lot more flesh put on the bones in terms of the operating model, et cetera, and in terms of the ability to express concerns or think about procurement and the importance of things like procurement for local economies. That will be the time in which we can add a lot more flesh to the bones in terms of the proposal. Yep, so we'll continue to engage through the Waikato Mayoral Forum. We'll continue to bring back information to you as much as possible that we get shared or we find in other places. And as I say, there'll be an ongoing process of either informal workshops today, like today, where we can get presenters in and speakers, and in a formal paper where we can, in public, formally identify what our preferred options are. Mike and I also have a series, setting up a series of hui with our iwi chairs and chief executives so that we have that conversation going on, given that one of the government criteria is also to give cognizance to and protect treaty settlements. So it's incumbent on us and the right thing to do to talk with our treaty partners, and we're setting up those meetings as we speak. I hear from you, though, that the comms plan with the community is really important, and the team's very strongly heard that message, and we'll just try and keep this as a very open and ongoing conversation. This will require resource. We're currently trying to do it within our current resourcing, within our current budgets, but the other thing to note is that this may take people off other work programs while we focus on this and do a sprint to the finish.
Just in terms of timing and logistics, when you talk about that September through March period, is that when you will start doing things like representation models like we talked about this morning, like sort of, how do we physically make things work, etc. Is that so the representation model would follow on from the big high level decision?
I think in the initial proposal, I think government's expecting us to see at least our intention with a representative model, even if it's high level principles to say the rural urban populations need to be represented in a fair way. We've got these concerns that will need to be addressed. The Department of Internal Affairs have said in your proposal, you need to raise the issues that you will need to work on further. And I expect that that will be one of them. Here's a kind of first glance of what a representation model might look like in the high level proposal. But here are the things that we will need to keep working on post cabinet decision. Absolutely. The operating model, the representative model, all of those key, the financials, the transition costs, all of those kind of considerations.
So those have to come effectively before September?
So there's only a very high level of those before September. you are right. Between September and March is when you really start to put the flesh on the bones.
I'll just say too that, at this stage, Waipa and Waikato, the only ones I've heard of that have really, in draft form, have said that we're interested in a unitary as our first choice. I mean, unless others come on board, we don't meet any of the official criteria for 50% of the population or 6 or more territorial. So there's still quite a bit of water under the bridge to us get there, which doesn't mean you don't put something in, but you don't want to put something in that's really going to get knocked back from the get-go. So how the other TAs come in, and particularly Hamilton, but how the other TAs come in is really important. I think, was it Craig alluded to the fact that, if you've got enough people on the same page, then the government are going to look at that and they're going to make their own decision. But I think the important thing for me is actually we actually meet the criteria. We didn't set it, the government did. So we really need another, 1 or 2, but Hamilton are key. Their decision is really key for this Waikato thing to fly. They're an integral part of that.
Just further to your question, the challenge for us as CEs is that I think we have a very good feel for the level of evidence that you're going to require to be able to make a decision, even at the high level proposal. And my suspicion is that what you'll require is actually more than what's actually required in the high level proposal. So we're going to have to put a fair level of flesh on the bones even before we get to that high level proposal for you to feel comfortable on behalf of the community that it's a proposal with best information that you can agree to as councils. And that's the challenge within, I think Warren just said there's 67 days left. Within that 67 days, can we put a proposal together that is going to be of sufficient weight and evidence for you to feel like you can endorse? And it's we have said, yep, we're interested in the Head Start. We're going to pursue that, and we're just going to have to work within the confines that we're given. And knowing though that there is a backstop model behind it with less information about that and a lot more to go in terms of determining what that looks like. But we're just going to work with the best intention and put the best evidence before you. I suspect that's a little bit behind your question is how much are you going to know before that proposal goes to cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are, a high level proposal has to, by definition, have the consequences are going to be, this was a more likely outcome. So, yeah, I mean, and there's a limited amount of time between now and, 9th of August, on the basis that council won't meet in the month of July.
We will need to be meeting a couple of times in July because there's the proposal. If there's a proposal on the table, firstly, you need to consider your options, decide what is your preferred of the options that we give you, and then further work needs to be done on that. So I suspect that we're going to have to be very clever about some timing in July as well.
Clear.
I just want to say I'm really rapt with what you were telling us about what the plans are, trying to get that evidence base for us. I really appreciate it. I mean, that's exactly what I was hoping for. Yeah, so I just want to totally endorse your approach, and I appreciate it's going to be difficult to resource and meet the timeframes. If there's something that we realise that is going to be an important factor that we haven't really talked about yet, are we able to feed that through to you? Like, for instance, like I've heard what Les has been saying. He's highlighting about procurement, and I have been thinking about what impact a regional model would be for local businesses, that have been, I suppose, been operating in Waipa. Yeah, and I mean, it probably would be nice to know if there's a likelihood of being able to get that, our current procurement policy has provisions in there for local business, and whether or not that could be protected, or is it going to actually be completely swamped because there is a really strong drive to get, say, 1 or 2 contractors over the whole region that are going to do this stuff. Yeah, I mean, I would be quite interested in that because I do wonder, the impact on the local economic levels. Yeah, that kind of business.
Some criteria like that that you feel are important to bring forward into the discussion is really important. And if it's protecting, having sound procurement policies that protect the local businesses of the Waikato and ensure strengthened local communities, I'm more than happy. And in fact, I would appreciate that you giving me that feedback so that we can build that into our proposal, and I can share that with the collective, whoever we end up with, is saying these things are important and should be on the further considerations list as we build the model. I think those things are really important, Claire. How do we see placemaking? How do we see, do you want to consider other things? So we've talked a lot about structure, but participatory decision-making doesn't involve hard structures. It's about evolving the way we involve people and apply different philosophies and methodologies to engaging community voice. So if participatory democracy methodologies are something that you want explored as a kind of a trade-off for going to a larger organisation, those sorts of principles, I'd be really keen to hear from you.
That'd be great. I am aware of the Swiss model that does protect participation. Yeah, it has those two levels. So you've got the cantons and then you've got the population. And they do use electronic systems, which would make it easier for them to participate, I guess, in a wide geographical area. And that could be one option. The downside is you do have a lot of people that aren't really keen to participate in those online things yet. And I don't think our current government has supported online voting. Yeah, so there would be challenges, but I mean, that could be something that could, I wouldn't say it needs a lot of concentration or a lot of resource, but it might be an option. Yeah, going forward.
Yeah, just carrying on from Claire there. When we set up these CCOs, I know that like their water board, no, it can't be privatised, but they can still enter into a partnership with these organisations to run their businesses. And we have no say or anything over that from that point of view.
No, the shareholders forum, the statement of expectations can be very clear, Les, about the way in which the CCO is conducting its business and key investment decisions. So, and I think that the CCO legislation has been quite clear in terms of restricting private investment into public assets. The Commerce Commission is obviously going to be the regulatory body that's observing that. So I think there have been safeguards built in, whether they're to the level that you would expect, I'm not sure, but there have been safeguards built into those waters entity for that very reason, because the government was very clear it didn't want private investment in public water assets in New Zealand.
Well, time will tell, I suppose.
Exactly.
I just wanted to ask a question about, and it comes off our comms and engagement workshop that we had yesterday with Scott and Lisa. Really, with the confines of time and resourcing that we have before August the 9th, what kind of meaningful engagement could we possibly do with the community where they feel like, because most of the people I chat to about this casually either have no idea at all that it's happening or have very limited information of what it entails. So how can we reach people in a way that's meaningful, but also that's quick and cheap and really lets the community know all of the work that we're doing in the background? I know you said the other day that some of the other councils had put out, resources for their community. Are we close to that, or what's the plan looking like?
Yep, I think we're pretty close to that. Looking across at Lisa, saying Lisa's been doing a lot of work in the background to prepare us. We've looked at what Western Bay have done, Horowhenua, Hauraki, Far North, there's a whole Taupo, there's a range of councils. We want to run that past Mike in the first instance and get his comfort around it. We'll show it to you and share it with you. And I think that we'll use a range of channels. It will have to be quick. It won't be, I think you heard Craig use the same language. This is not engagement in terms of the promise under the International Participatory Engagement Framework, right? So we've got to be clear. It's about information sharing and communication with the community. But I think we would really appreciate some engagement from all of you as well, and using your connections into the community to get feedback and make contact with people. So we will bring that to you. Mike just asked me this morning, where is that? And can we share it with councillors and get your comfort levels about that as soon as possible? If not today, Lisa and I will be meeting within the next 12 hours at some point to go through that. So, yep. Do you want to say anything to that, Lisa? Do you want to add anything to that?
Just that the comms approach has been drafted, and as Steph said, it will be multi-channel. So there will be some videos, there will be some email, direct mail through emails to our stakeholder databases. We will have a couple of face-to-face opportunities. We're not going to be able to get around to all of the district, but markets are definitely a really good place for us to engage in people. So yeah, it will be multifaceted.
And a survey.
And a survey, yes. Yeah, we'll also be doing some hard advertising in the newspaper, pointing people to the survey.
Steph alluded to she's got a meeting with the CEs this afternoon. So anything burning, she can take that back this afternoon also. But I mean, you would have picked up the flavour of the room by the questions as well. All right, team. Happy? Oh, yeah, Monty?
I'll just put my 2 cents worth. Just at this period of this proposal, I'd really like to avoid getting into a detail and going down sort of rabbit holes on detail. That's not what's important here. I mean, you're not doing this really to try and save money. This is a strategic case to do something better. So I wouldn't be worrying too much about detail. I wouldn't be worrying too much about money. I would be worrying about what the governance and representation structure looks like, because this is your chance to get it right. So in terms of organisational sort of resource, that's where I'd be heading at this stage for the high level proposal. All the rest of it comes later. But now's your chance to have a decent think about that.
Yeah, look, and on that, Monty, I think it's not trying to herd cats at the moment. You've only got 2 TAs involved, but as hopefully more come on board, that's going to be really important to actually get people on board. If they don't believe in the structure, they're not going to put their hand up. So it's probably the most important thing to actually get people in the tent.
And just for clarity, so the Regional Council hasn't been invited to put forward a proposal by the government. In fact, they're not allowed to. But what they've done is using their data lake, being able to provide a model and as a starting point. Obviously, because they're already regional, they've got all of that democratic information about representation, etc. So that's really helpful from them. And they're playing a really critical role around the table to help us build an evidence-based approach to this. And as we heard this morning, their functions are incredibly critical on so many levels. So I just want to acknowledge the Regional Council for their contribution and participation in this. I think it's critical.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned earlier on, Steph, that you'd created something in Diligent. Can you tell us where it is in Diligent? I just can't find it.
Not by I will send you something by email. I'll get it from the team. I asked for it yesterday to be created because I've got information coming in and I know you just like the opportunity to read it at leisure. So I'll send you the link for it very shortly.
Lovely, thank you.
More reading.
Steph, you may not be able to answer this. In terms of Hamilton's decision-making, do we know any timeframes or not?
I can get that this afternoon and come back to you about whether.
Yeah, it'd be quite key. And to Roger's point, there's no point getting Hamilton in here if we do before they actually have a position, or at least a preferred position. All right, team. Oh, it's all good. All right. Well, thank you for that.
The next point on the agenda was really just checking in about the LTP. So I can it's a quick conversation. I think what's really important, and Kirsty jump in as the lead in the team, but as our thinking emerges around Head Start, we just want to have the opportunity to keep checking in with you about the long-term plan and how this context changes. The messaging we've heard from you is that developing a really sound LTP is still really important. It's certainly the message that we've heard from the ministers and cabinet to say actually your LTP will be your handover plan to a large degree. So we've heard that message from you in our LTP workshops. But I guess given at each point in time, just in the interest of transparency and open communication, just to have these touch points where we say, is there anything that's come to mind for you that we need to take into consideration for the LTP? Or are you quite comfortable with the way we're progressing? we are going to progress on the basis of the program plan that we've presented to you. You were updated on yesterday, I think, from Bridget, and we'll keep progressing on that basis. But really important, given it's such a significant piece of work, and all things being equal, if a proposal's accepted and goes ahead, it will be our handover, part of our transition and handover plan. So the team have very wisely put this on the agenda just to keep that conversation open.
Thanks, Steph. Just with regard to the role of Audit New Zealand, so obviously we went through the waters process as we were developing a long-term plan and I guess had different positions in what was included and not in the long-term plan. So as you're aware, as we developed the 27-37 long-term plan, we have established a different approach, I guess a more collaborative approach with our audit partners, and certainly the team met with Renee and the team yesterday. They know as much as what we do at this point in time, but we be rest assured that dialogue will be ongoing, and we will certainly be responding and updating you as we get more clarity from our audit partners also.
I took us into this territory at the last LTP workshop. You might remember towards the end, because people were beginning to sort of question, should we do this, should we do that, given that we're not, well, maybe not going to exist. And so we spent, 10 minutes talking about it. So I was kind of glad to see this has come up, because it's pretty clear to me that it changes very little, that you still do a really, really good LTP. It's probably going to be your last. And that actually, I think I said that makes it more important, not less important. So that's my position, but I would really like the group to agree on that, or otherwise, because I don't want this to sort of niggle away the whole way through as we're going through the process.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Monty. And look, yeah, I guess to reiterate that, I mean, I made a comment that the whole thing's really important, but the first 2 or 3 years are the most important because we still exist as Waipa. So I agree, this is the handover document, and if you don't do it well, whatever comes next is you're putting it at risk. So that'll be my take on it. Claire, then Ion, then Dean. Shane, sorry.
Yeah, so it's good to have the touch point, and I agree too. It's really important for us to do a great job of the LTP, as accurate as possible. It also means, though, that we've got to still apply our brains to how we're going to face those challenges that have already been signalled. Yeah, so it hasn't got us out of that. Yeah, I'm still in two minds as to whether or not after the first 3 years, and I totally agree with your statement that, yeah, the first 3 are really important, but after that, should we build in any funding changes to reflect that we do expect an amalgamation or not? I mean, it's probably easier not to. Yeah, it's probably safer not to. Yeah, especially as there've been some statements that it's not really been done to save money, yeah, or expect big savings. Yeah, so
a lot of uncertainty too, from an audit perspective, if we were to build in some assumptions that weren't reasonably able to be tested with any sound kind of methodology would be quite difficult. So I think to your point, just continuing based on the assumptions and the thinking that we have now is probably the most prudent option.
Yeah, yeah. So the biggest point I wanted to make today was that at the last conversation we had, Roger and I were saying that we needed to look at what was core, mixed, and then discretionary, because we both of us, I think, are expecting that legislation to be passed with the simplification of local government, and that we should be then preparing to demonstrate to our communities that we have done that analysis. And if there is stuff that's mixed or discretionary that we do want to carry on funding, we've got to say why, basically. Yeah. And so from that conversation, Ian jumped in with his AI master skills and has produced those 2 OPEX and CAPEX spreadsheets. And just on his own, he has applied what he heard from the discussion, and he's put in a first cut based on the last LTP, with 3 years projection. So I don't know if any of you guys have been able to see it, or maybe Ian was going to talk about it as well, but I just felt that is a good starting point if we were wanting to go down that road of expecting to have to work towards a core business and that kind of thing.
Thanks, Kia. And I think it's really good thinking for the audience sake. Once the Simplifying Local Government Bill comes through, it will clearly identify council's core priorities that central government have changed from the former local government bill. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the LTP needs to be very clear. We will obviously consider that through the levels of service review as well that we will embark on. And thank goodness for Iron and AI, is all I can say. So I think that will help us expedite that thinking and get some clarity without spinning wheels too much on it. And I'm really interested to see what it pops up in terms of whether there's actually any material change. Having had the wellbeings put in and out 4 times in the last 20 years and not really seeing too much material change, I'm interested to see what this brings about for us. So I'm looking around at the team, knowing Kirsty leads it, but I think it's a really good approach to take.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, probably we can take it offline rather than discuss the AI and its results in this forum. We've got some other agenda items to get onto, but I really appreciate the approach and the initiative.
Right.
Sorry, just on that, sorry, Claire, you raised this yesterday in the reporting on the strategy work program and LTP reporting, and I think my response was that we will have a look at it as with the PGG. We're meeting next week to look at that levels of service review approach and material. Thank you.
So you notice that my first 2 letters of my name are actually AI, but anyway.
Rather spooky, councillor.
Some pre-essence from my father, clearly. So yeah, just in terms of the approach, I wholeheartedly agree with Monty. I think we need to do a really good job of all 10 years. And I think I said it the other day, I'll say it again, we've got to do a bit of cognitive dissonance there and think about 2 competing things at the same time, which is, as far as LTP is concerned, amalgamation doesn't exist. That's I believe is the cleanest way to do it, because otherwise it's hard enough as is without modeling more complexity into that scenario. And then just to pick up on the point Claire made, I got an AI to produce how I would like to think about what our spending is over time to help inform that level of service conversation. And so I've circulated it to the EMs just yesterday. I'll take you all through it later. I wanted them to, that's just my view of the world. I checked it with Claire and she was like, yeah, this would kind of work for me as well. And so I obviously want to circulate that around the rest of the group because it might just be the mad noodlings of someone who loves Excel. But assuming that we get somewhere that makes sense, then we'd share it with Bridget and say, okay, I'm trying to make it as simple as we possibly can for us to have that conversation.
Thanks,
That's where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, so what we'll ask you to do is put it through the formal channels because it'll come into the PGG. So I think it comes through the GM rather than direct to the team. So the methodology is, absolutely do your work, do your thinking as elected members and then put it through the GM responsible. Thank you.
Perfect.
Dean.
Thanks very much. I had noticed the AI, the next letter's a D. But I'm agreeing, I think we need to do a great job on the 10-year plan. And, if it was me, I'd put a whole lot of lollies in there, but then we wouldn't be able to, justify them. So they get bowled out anyway, negotiate back. But what I do worry about is something like, so I'm passionate about, the concept of Te Arawai, and I want to know what happens to a project like that in this situation, because at the moment it's parked, I suppose, like a lot of stuff. So what I want to know, where does it go? And if we're passionate about it, like I am when we want it. Like I was looking at the presentation before and they were showing us the icons in the Waikato, and Te Arawai should be on that list. but it's not yet. And it's really disappointing for me and probably a lot of other people. So how do we deal with something like that, you know, in the long-term plan?
Thanks, Dean. Craig knew he was being provocative, and that where he put that slide up, he knew he'd get shot for missing something off. So that's right. So what we've learned from another council recently is that in the LTP, they almost had a sort of a 15-year horizon as well. And if we can't determine that we can fund something within the 10-year horizon, that it's clearly stated in the LTP, even if it's just written, that these are the projects that are important to the district and need to be, you know, there was further work to be done. Now, and those, as I said to you yesterday, when we had or the day before, we had a really good conversation about Te Arawai, that these projects, in my experience, do take some time to come online, and they can often go through several iterations. So the thing that we would need to do is make sure that there's at least operational funding in the LTP to keep the analysis, the relationships and the due diligence done on it to see how we could bring it to life, and whether there's any significant CapEx funding in the future could be something that we record in the LTP in a way that fits audit, that suits audit, but actually is an indicator to the community that it's not disappeared, it's there, and it's very important to us. So there's a number of ways we can do that, Dean, and rest assured it won't disappear. But it will be up to a funding decision that you can take around this table as to how much operational funding that you want to give us as a team to be able to continue to do the work in behind the scenes.
If I can just follow on for a minute. I mean, it's on a way different scale now. But, you know, many years ago when we'd not long had our event centre built and we were starting to redevelop that precinct of our town, which had been fairly scruffy until that point in time, there was a piece of land identified for a playground, but there was no money, but it was in the plan as playground unfunded. Well, a group of us delivered that playground at no cost to the council because it was in the plan and unfunded. So we found a way to make it funded and then we got it. So you know, in my wildest dreams, you know, I might win lotto on the weekend and just buy it. So Te Arawai, I mean, or whatever we decide to have. So someone might come forward if it's there. So it's got to be there, right? Something's got to be there that people know they can work towards.
Absolutely. We'll record, Councillor Taylor, that you'll fund Te Arawai. So, yeah, thank you. But point noted, and there are ways and means through these things, absolutely.
Right, Shane, followed by Pip.
Well, I just backing up that, you know, forgetting about what's happening around us, we've got to focus on the LTP. It's got to be the best, most fiscal LTP ever produced out of Waipa, and it will become a model for all councils in the future about how to do it.
Yes.
Mate, you sound like you could stand to be the next Lord Mayor. Pip.
I just reinforce sort of the other comments, and you know, if we want to do something in the region, we've got to say this is what we want to do. Maybe not now, but in the future. You know, I think of Karapiro and all the things that you'd like to do. You know, for example, boat ramps or something. I mean, all of those concepts and ideas that we had that we want the region to be better has to be included in that plan. Otherwise, if you merge with somebody else, all of those ideas have to be started again.
Yeah, we've still got, oh, sorry, Dalmarie, you on the list?
Yeah, no.
Right, we've still got 15, 20 minutes though. So Ian, you're next up. Anyone after Ian though at this point? No.
This one's a little bit out of left field actually. We were talking a bit about innovation recently. And I wonder if, would we have, because when I think about what is actually going to be difficult about the LTP, it's going to be the balance between spend and level of service, right? That's because there's only so many levers we can pull, and that's one of them. And none of us are keen to decrease levels of service, but all of us know how much of a fiscal challenge we're staring at. So another lever you can pull is, well, can you continue to offer the same level of service, but in a more efficient manner, which is another word for innovation. Would we have, you know, and I was actually thinking about some of the comments yesterday from the community reference group and others, the community board around, you know, there's some smart cookies out there in our community. You know, when we're looking for innovation in the delivery of some of our services, is there a way we could, in the same way that we, you know, look to engage on, hey, have you got any smart ideas on how we do blah, blah? I think that would, you know, I know time is of the essence, but I wonder if that could be part of our engagement piece, because that would also be a really good way of making people feel involved and also explaining a little bit what the challenges we're facing are in reality as we form up the LTP.
I think that would give great practical expression to one of the key fundamental reasons for why we're doing our Future Us project, which is about putting community at the heart of what we do. So if in our early engagement with the LTP, we can ask those kind of questions and seek feedback, fantastic.
I just want to pick up on a point you made there, though, that I don't think we've agreed on. You sort of said we're not going to reduce levels of service. That, to me, we haven't had the discussion. Yes, yeah.
Totally agree. I said I don't think any of us are too keen to reduce levels of service, but yes, no, I'm with you on that page, Mike.
Right, and Monty.
Just thinking about the LTP, the one thing that probably does change if you know you're going out of existence is the kind of organisational stuff, though, right? The investment to make the organisation more efficient that is going to be multi-year payback. You change your thinking about that pretty drastically.
Yeah, we already have, Monty. Yeah, absolutely on the money. So our Future Us transformation plan is going to look, if this gets legs and our proposal is accepted by Cabinet, and whatever the horizon is looking like, we're already starting to think about the adjustment for the Future Us transformation roadmap, and the team's already working on that. Absolutely. Yeah.
At this time, yeah, I just wanted to jump in on what Ian raised about innovation, because I think that's a great approach. It's pretty exciting, actually, I thought. But to actually help the community respond to that invitation to come up with some suggestions, I think that they've got to have a starting point in a way. And that's what I liked, I guess, about that analysis that was done about splitting up our spend at the moment into what's core and discretionary and mixed in that. Because I would think that staff might be able to identify those bits of it that would offer the most potential for an innovative approach, and maybe select that shorter list to then say to the community, like here's our best picks for where we think innovation could make the biggest difference. We're open to ideas or things, rather than just giving them the whole list or just think of all the things that council does. Where do you think we might improve? But if you can sort of give them a starter and give them the areas where they think, where you think you'd get the best bang for buck. Yeah.
So I hear your point, and we'll take that on board, Claire. Yeah, we'll take that on board. Hear your message. Thank you.
I was in a meeting the other day, and I won't have this quite right, but they put it into 4 baskets. In fact, I think it was Mayor Rodney from down Orchard, and it was along the lines of legislative, mandatory, and I've made up the next one like expected. Maybe that's your level of service thing, and then discretionary. But it's the same concept. But yeah, Shane.
Just to further on Ian's point, and I've been advocating for a little while about this concept of value for money committee that Auckland has, where last year I think they saved $76 million. And what that was a group of councillors, because staff are so busy, they've got all these things, they come up with ideas and then they themselves do a little bit of work. And I don't know exactly how the structure works, but I'm going to try to find out. But, you know, they take ideas and they develop them, and it's been very, very successful. So I just think we just need to take some learnings from that as well, and it takes a bit of pressure, do it in such a way that the staff takes the pressure off staff, and we can contribute a little bit more.
I think this all feeds into the conversations about future us, organisational maturity, the flexibility and adaptation, the DNA in the organisation for innovation. I think those things are really worthy things. Don't get me wrong, Shane, and I think they're great. They're great things to think about. I'm in the very early stages of future us. I've come in. This is still quite early, as you know, and so we need to think about the maturity of the organisation and its ability to flex. And also, as you know, we are downsizing the organisation as we speak and resetting the organisation post-Waters. So I want to say that I applaud all these ideas. I think there's a great ideas. We certainly need to work towards them. But as I've said to you previously, we can only do so much at one time. And we need to think about where our priorities lie, particularly as we're leading into this LTP. But I'm not saying it's with a closed mind. I'm just providing context for where we're at as a council.
Yeah, understood. I think I gave the example the other day where they took the idea of the bins that kept getting broken. Instead of getting a contractor, they had the prisoners fix them, and they saved a huge amount of money every year. Just those sort of little ideas. But what I will be doing, my learned friend from Prongia has instructed me, is to understand a little bit more about how it's all set up and what the relationship is with staff and how it all works. And then once we understand that, then we'll see if the maturity of the organisation or the structure of the organisation we have now could fit that model or not fit that model. And there might be some other ways of doing it. But anyway, I think it's just worthy of, and it also gives a very strong message to ratepayers that we're focused on these sorts of things, like procurement and all these sorts of things.
No, good. Be good to see what they've done up there. Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to say, with kind of amalgamation on our doorstep, I think those relationships we have with the community and community groups where they can help, especially with our confined resources. I know some of these things are just a drop in the bucket, but, you know, Barb and I are working with that Public Art Trust, Dean with his work with the Save the Cambridge Water Tower. What external funding can we do? And I think as elected members, we all have a role in that. We all have connections, and sure, it's not going to make huge amounts of difference, but every little bit helps, right? So I think as we go into that bigger model, what can we be drawing from our community that people can help us with, looking at projects for LTP that might have to be paused?
Yeah, and there's the financial side of it, Joe, and as you're alluding to, is also the connection piece, which is in some ways as important. Anyone else? Anyone who hasn't spoken or only spoken once? Kapai? All right. No, thank you for that. So happy with that, Steph? Kirsty? Yep, very good. Right, so we have an update from Barbara Dempsey on the recovery. It's a verbal update for us. Oh, that's fine too. Thank you, Barbara.
And I've got Yolanda on the line. Kia ora, Mayor Mike and councillors, thanks for the opportunity to and the time to give a presentation on the February event. I'm going to start with a disclosure. I can take no credit at all for either response, recovery, and acknowledge Wayne, Sally, EL and their teams for their hard mahi, and thank the teams that have provided me information for this presentation. As you realise, I wasn't here, and so I don't have a lot of information, but apologies if I'm missing something or I'm doubling up. Good, works. So what I was going to try and do is give you a snapshot of the event, very short, because I'm sure that most of you will have a very good idea of what happened in February. Explain a little bit about transition from response to recovery, talk about how recovery works, particularly the 4 environments that we work within and what's happened within those environments. Talk about money. These events are very costly, so talk about the anticipated financial impacts, and also give you an idea of the government financial support that is available, and then the next steps. So we had a And yeah, I'm sure that a lot of this information is familiar to you, so I didn't propose to be a presenter who read the bullet points, but try and summarise it. But we did have a 1 in 250 year event, or a 0.4 AEP, and I'm sure most of you know that means that there's the chances of having another event of that severity in this year is 0.4%. And I understand, although I haven't done the stats regularly, recently, is the odds of winning lottos. That's better than the odds of winning lotto, or worse, whichever way you look at it. I mean, as listed, there's numbers of roads, culverts, bridges, water services, natural environments that were damaged. We evacuated many people during the response, but these people are now back in their homes, and they were back in their homes by the time we entered into recovery. Transition to response, from response to recovery. So we transitioned to recovery on the 25th of February, and we had a transition period of 28 days, although Wayne's just updated me in the break that I think that got interrupted along the way. But for your information, if you don't know, that transition period gives the recovery manager powers under legislation that you don't have if you exit the transition. And that could be, I don't have a local example, but in my example, when I was recovery manager at Edgecombe, that is the ability to keep people off private land, which we don't normally under other legislation have. So the handover is a formal process, but the reality and the goal is that when you're working in this environment, that the community don't see that, and it's smooth. And the teams are very good at just continuing doing the work. Our response is very structured. It's well-defined command and control, and that's required when you have a fast-moving event. As a controller, you want to know what's going to happen. You don't want to be surprised by initiative. You need to have the environment. But in recovery, it's less so. It's up there. It's more about coordination, communication, and collaboration. When you get into recovery, you work in 4 pillars or 4 streams of work, depending on the event. Community would feature in every event. Built, probably. Economic, natural, it would depend on what the event is and how it's impacted on your community. But at the beginning of recovery, you decide what resources you need depending on that. We had all of them in this event. So the first one is community. It's people, people, people. In my view, obviously the most important, the reason we're here and it is in the forefront of every recovery manager's mind. It's really fortunate that Waipa did not experience quite as much damage as other communities did for people in their homes. In saying that, you do have to acknowledge every event is traumatic. I have got more notes than I would normally have because I don't have as much knowledge as I would normally have. But in saying that, the council did reach out to the community. I know yourselves did. We had events, we provided regular updates, and we tried as hard as we could to keep the community updated on what was happening. I've had it added to the list that 2 marae stood up, and they were an ODC. And the reason I put that on the presentation is marae stand up in a response rather than recovery, but I didn't want to let the time go without acknowledging how important marae are particularly in our response. Marae are very generous in sharing their facility and the care that they provide for people, and I know 2 marae stood up at this situation. They haven't had a chance to catch up with Wayne, but I'm sure we've got a lot of other marae that would do the same in other areas. The economic impact, I understand, wasn't too high. We had 8 businesses that were impacted, and many rural properties experienced damage. Muir Relief Fund helped with ease the financial benefit, financial pain, and other sector groups such as the Rural Support Trust, MSD, IRD, others provided support and expertise to people that were affected. I think we just need to note that opening roads, and particularly state highways, as quickly as possible is extremely important. The built environment there, we had the roading and waters team and contractors worked really hard to clear culverts, and the normal stuff they do, clear culverts, undertake road remediation, repair some bridges. The Titahi water treatment plant remains a concern, as do 2 bridges. Geotech assessments have been undertaken in many areas, and the work that has been undertaken as taken into consideration the geotech assessment. I've just had an email that I'm going to read from Brian since I did this, and there are 2 other sites at Limeworks Loop and French Pass Road that require repairs in 2026-27. These sites are from events prior to the February, but did incur an additional 790,000 Ks in cost.
They were events towards the end of 2025.
And I understand that funding is being sought from NZTA, but council will have to make a decision shortly on where the local share funding is coming from, and a report will be coming to the June meeting. Natural, this is your environment, and this is where our friends from Regional Council probably do an awful lot of work, clearing streams, etc., in catchments, not generally. So there is a lot of clearing of waterways / etc., and a lot of recovery of walkways, reserves. Those 4 slides, very short, a summary of what happened and that the work was undertaken. And when you go quickly like that, it doesn't seem a lot, but I think that we must acknowledge that all of those projects required staff and contractors to pivot quickly and undertake significant amount of work, unplanned work that affects their ability to do whatever was planned. I thought this was going to be smaller. You've seen this information before, understand. I think Yolanda brought this to a May meeting, and it is a quick summary of CapEx and OpEx, and I didn't put the total in there, the total. That adds up to just under $40 million. So what expenditure obviously is one aspect of response and recovery, but it's also good to remember that the government has some options for us to get some money back. So there is government financial support. Mayoral Relief Fund, you receive money and that's been expended. There is government financial support to local authority in the Essential Infrastructure Fund. That's limited to water, wastewater, and the reimbursement policy is 60% of that combined eligible essential infrastructure costs. So as I think it's 2.7 as our YPA's net capital value means that any claim that we put to central government is reduced by 2.7 million, and then they will grant us 60% of the remaining cost. That and when we talk about the financials and the impact to council, it's a little bit hard to actually quantify that, because while you get that refund from that fund, you've got to provide invoices. It's actual refund on money spent. So until you get some really good, robust costings for some of the work that's still to come, you don't know what your 60% is. NZTA subsidy indications are that this council, along with many other councils, will have an increased subsidy from 51 to 71%. But again, there's criteria to that. Some roads may or may not qualify, whether it's like for like. So there's some detail in that. So I guess the news is that there is money and we will get some money, but it's a little while before we know the exact quantum of that money. And for completeness, parks and reserves, no financial assistance. We should be insured for that. I can't answer whether we are or not. Yolanda might know the answer to that, or Steph. Welfare is reimbursed. We didn't.
But Barbara, are you okay to answer questions during
sorry,
this? Or?
Conversations
Yeah,
way better. Yes.
no, fine. So, Delmarie?
In regards to the welfare part that you're just about to give us a corridor on, Barbara, I had a concern brought to me in regards, and this is from Purikiriki Marae, in and around how the support is, as you said, Marae are really good at standing up. They stand up on their own first. What are the mechanisms that are in place to look after them in the wash-up, I suppose is what I'm asking.
Yep. So there's a criteria around welfare reimbursement. And so if this council or Marae have direct welfare costs, Wayne, I don't know, we have a relationship, I guess, with the Marae from a civil defence perspective. They could talk to Dave or Kathy to check out the criteria. And there is a refund option available. I don't know the detail of what they might be looking for, but it's worth asking Dave or Kathy, whoever their contact is or Wayne, or Wayne's saying. And I think that, and I'm sure we are here too, but in most councils, we're looking at very closely working with Marae and looking at making sure that there's an opportunity that if they are in a very strategic position, which Marae often are, because they know where not to build, that we have relationships where that can be a little bit more formal. And I'm sure, we've only got 0.8 of a resource allocated to Waipa, but I'm sure within that resource that we're working in that area as well. But yell out, Wayne's your man. You went like this, so he's your man. We didn't claim sorry. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. I just want to understand that first section there about the reimbursement we get from central government is 60%, but only for amounts above the percent of net capital value.
That's right.
So could you just take me through that step by step? I can't understand why it can't just be 60% of the combined eligible essential infrastructure costs, why it has to be then limited by that other metric. Yeah.
I probably can't answer that. That is a criteria that the government has set down that works for everyone. I mean, the previous council I worked with in February, theirs was a small council, but theirs was 3 million. So it's just a criteria that government has set down, is that, and the other 40% should be covered by our infrastructure insurance.
Oh, right,
So,
yeah.
I guess if you're going to have an event, you want it to be beyond 2.7 million sort of thing, to be fair, which ours clearly was. So qualifying.
It's worse than coming in at 2.5.
And just to be clarified, because I'm a bit slow on this, but that means that as long as it's over 2.7, we do get the 60%. We don't get a percentage reduced because of that, I suppose, proportion of, no. Oh, okay, I know that's cool.
So you get the
so it has to be a certain magnitude to qualify.
So you take off whatever the net capital value is, you take that off depending on how much it is per council, and then it's 60-40. And a lot of us call it the 60-40 fund. But we've just got to remember there is criteria. So our teams that are working, and it is only wastewater and central, roading obviously comes through, your funding or your refund comes through NZTA.
Yeah.
So this is about our teams working very closely with the people from National Emergency Management Office, to ensure they can get as much money put into that fund as possible.
Oh, no, that's great. It's been quite helpful. And I just wanted to check, have we got an update on how the insurance claim is going? Or
no, I'm sorry, I have to
provide. Yeah, because I think the last report we had from Sally was that there was going to be a claim made, but she didn't have any idea how it would be received. It'd be quite good to get an update once you've had a response on that, actually. Yeah.
I would surmise, I can, but I would surmise it's in a similar position of understanding the exact costs, because I'm sure the insurance company will be as firm as government about making sure that they're not paying out on estimates, but I will get an update on that. So recovery's completed now. The staff that were working in the recovery office have gone back to their BAU. And so what I'm going to do is go through a couple of slides of the outstanding work that's been handed back to predominantly poor old EL's team. Ka ki puku? Close? Whatever. Oh, yeah, okay, cool. You want to see how I've spelt it here. The track assessment's been completed, signage is in place, and we're moving forward on repairing that at some stage. Sorry, I don't actually have a detail of when that will be, but we'll provide that in our updates to you on the radar, is it? Is that, yeah. Parongia, not so hard, used to that name. So there's quite a bit of work to do there on the tracks as we've set up there. Safety signage is all in place. So I think this will take a little while, and particularly in relation to the work in the forestry roads. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer as to whether that is claimable. I think they're private roads, which means they wouldn't be.
I don't know, Barb, but just a question of clarification, those truckload movements, is that truckload movements of soil and slash to take out to rehabilitate those roads, or is it the rebuilding of the roads themselves, etc., that PF Olsen will have to do? So it's all the activity required in the forest to
That's my
rehabilitate that area.
That's the way I understood it when I was talking to the team. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so next is roading. So we've obviously got two bridges, Mana Ika and Whati Uru. Papauri. Bridges have been opened, but there's temporary either one ways or temporary there. So the subject to funding and consenting particularly is likely to take quite a long time to repair those. Waters is the biggie, I guess. Te Tahi water treatment plant. So the team are working through options at the moment. The project will be handed over to WWL. I have touched base with NEMA. They are aware of the size and scale of any potential either remediation or new build in relation to Te Tahi water treatment plant. They are open to providing the 60-40 share, which would normally be like for like, but they understand the situation here. And the last conversation I had with NEMA yesterday was that when we're ready, they will come and talk to us about what the options are and how they can help, or WWL, whoever owns it at that point.
Sorry, Barb, Steph, have you got any more to report on that? Because I mean, this is the difference here of all the other damage in terms of direct impact on us as a council.
So Kevin Scott's been leading the team putting that project together. It's got direct representation from ourselves and Waikato Waters on it. They have been meeting with all of the people that they need to, including Fonterra. They've developed a project plan. They're looking at optioneering. As Barbara said, on the 1st of July, Waikato Waters will flip who's leading that project from us to Waikato Waters, but will stay on there and represented because it affects, you know, our Western district with such significance, including development growth, etc. So there's a project plan in play, and we're working methodically through that now. Mike?
Right, so just to confirm then, so it's handed over to Waikato Waters, so we're not going to remain the lead. We'll be a participant.
As of 1 July, they will take the lead. But it's a collaborative project, right? We realise that they've got ultimate responsibility, etc. But it is in situ. The context is so important for us in terms of our communities. And we know, I mean, Kevin's very clear that the community will want to talk with you, Mike, as well about it, and developers will come through our door if they're wanting to talk. But Waikato Waters has got to take that responsibility to lead the optioneering and the rebuild.
So I guess that's it. I think the recovery team have served you well and led through a process where now those projects with a long tail or a long lifeline will be handed back to BAU. No need to keep the recovery team there. So signing off on a closeout report will happen in the near future. So that's all I have. I hope that's given you a bit of an overview.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, thanks. I'm interested in the Te Tahi water treatment plant. You said the optioneering is ongoing now. Like, when are we likely to get an idea of what they think the long-term approach will be? I mean, like, for instance, the Pirongia community is quite affected, and the rest of the western side of the district as well, obviously. And so when we would it'd be quite good to know when we might get some clarity. Is there any
I'd say it's very early days, and I'm sure that Kevin could come back to us unless you have some dates. Kevin certainly hasn't come back to me with anything at this stage. I think it's very early days, but we could ask Kevin that question and come back to you. Excellent, thank you. Would you like to just check with Yolanda whether she's got anything she wishes to raise, or she may not, but can I just check in with her?
Yolanda, was there a shake of the head? You heard that question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Nothing from me. Thank you.
All right, look, hey, thanks for all the work that's going to be behind this, but, particularly as Barbara, you mentioned, Wayne, Sally, EL, I know there's a whole bunch of others, and I saw, Brad over there, and a whole bunch of people have put a lot of mahi into this over the, during the event, but during the transition and in the recovery right through to today. So, no Sally's gone, but just really wish to acknowledge her, for her work that's gone into this, and she worked on this right until she left. So, yeah, and Wayne, you're part into it, as well, right from being in the engine room down in the OE, what was this? EOC, and onwards. So, no, thank you for that, and let's hope we don't have to go through this again, to be fair. Right, so thank you very much. So what we can do is it's sort of our time now, so should we, lunch, it was supposed to be at 12:45, should we just bring the whole thing forward? Yeah, but should we bring the whole comeback forward? So if we're happy to come back at, say, 1:15, rather than 1:30, happy days? All right, thank you.
I just want to acknowledge some contextual things. So just need to, Yolanda, you're free to go. If you didn't pick that up, we've finished that session. So thanks for joining us. We just got to check with, okay. So do you want to end the session? Yeah. End the session, and then we can, yep, absolutely. We can end the meeting. Thank you.